save Ukrainian cities from demoralizing Russian bombardment and the country's military from devastating losses. But in terms of Ukraine's bid to ultimately win this war, much depends now on how quickly and effectively these new weapons can be deployed. This inquiry was presented by me, Tanya Beckett, produced by Lorna Reader, edited by Tara McDermott, and the technical producer was Matthew Dempsey.
That was the inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm R.C. Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Great to have you all with us. It is mostly cloudy in the city of Winnipeg. It's 10 degrees. Our high is 12, and we are expecting rain. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday morning, May the 15th, middle of the month already. Good morning to Corey Funk, who's our show director, and will be on air covering the commute. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's behind our controls, our technical producer, and will be covering the forecast on air through the show. And good morning to Brad Lillies, who's also in our control room working the YouTube channel. It is 3 minutes to 6 a.m. Heather Wells always starts our program properly with our look at our day's headlines and news. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, just a chance of showers forecast today for that area of northwest Manitoba where a wildfire has forced hundreds from their homes in Cranberry Portage. Premier Rob Canoe met with some of the evacuees yesterday, many staying temporarily in hotels in the Pas. Some are staying in Flin Flon. Canoe says his government will make sure they are supported, and depending how long it takes to get people back home, Canoe says some may need to relocate to other places like Dauphin, Brandon, or Winnipeg. And almost 3,000 hydro customers in Fort Richmond are still without power this morning. Manitoba Hydro says power went out late last night around 11:30. The utility hopes to have power restored in just minutes by 6 o'clock this morning. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So that'll make for a challenging morning in many ways if you're looking for power. But a couple of minutes, we'll let you know when it's back on. This hour on the program, we're going to talk about the legacy of Alice Munro, a literary giant. You may have heard yesterday it was announced that she has passed away. So we'll hear more about that. In addition, we're going to talk flood season. We'll look at the gaps in the federal government's proposed National Flood Insurance Program. So stay tuned as we have that discussion. On our medical column this morning, the clock might be ticking on Lyme disease in humans by way of a medicine that might kill ticks when they try to feed on you. So you might have long wondered, why is it that we have medicine for dogs and cats or animals, but not for humans? Well, it might be coming. So Dr. Raj Bhardwaj will talk about that. It's a small trial he's going to discuss, but that's on our medical column also in the first hour. And later in the program, we'll talk about the Birchwood Terrace apartments, people forced to evacuate there. We have a structural engineer on today who's going to talk to us.
With Tom Power. Kathleen Hanna, the legendary feminist punk rock icon, will tell you there's no HR department in punk rock. She'll be here to tell you about her new book and having to revisit the sexism she and her bands faced on the road and what made writing it down worth it. That's coming up on Q, followed by Promotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In Alberta, the wildfire threatening Fort McMurray is now more than 20,000 hectares in size, and it is still out of control. More than 6,000 people have left their homes. The CBC's Julia Wong has been speaking to some of them. They say this evacuation is bringing up traumatic memories from 8 years ago.
Bank files and insurance stuff, passports.
Alex Mortlock points to the stuff he grabbed from his Fort McMurray house after being told he had mere hours to leave. He's now staying at an RV park in Athabasca, about 300 kilometers southwest of Fort McMurray. His house is in one of 4 neighborhoods under an evacuation order. Mortlock fled the massive 2016 wildfire, losing his home, but says that experience did not make this one any easier.
Not really. Nothing can prepare you, I don't think. Still the same anxiety, same things going through your mind, and this time I have kids to worry about.
Fort McMurray Fire Chief Jody Butts says evacuating some neighborhoods will make it easier on crews.
If we can get the residents out of harm's way and we can get our structural protection resources in place, and going to work.
Butts says crews are more prepared than 8 years ago, when the fire, dubbed the Beast, forced out the entire city, ultimately destroying 2,400 houses and businesses. This fire is different from the 2016 fire, though. It's burning not in the trees, but on the ground, says Butts.
This fire, as we're looking out the window here today, it's in the old burn in 2016. So all the dead and down trees that were there, that's what's being burnt right now, along with some dry grass.
As for Mortlock, he's processing his latest evacuation and trying to stay calm.
A little panicked. Don't know if I'm going to have a home or if it's going to spread.
Local and provincial officials will hold an update later today. Julia Wong, CBC News, Athabasca, Alberta.
Fire officials in British Columbia say conditions for fighting the flames around Fort Nelson are favorable. Ben Bogeen is a fire behavior specialist. He says the fire closest to Fort Nelson is still just 2 kilometers away.
Reduced winds have resulted in favorable firefighting conditions, a reduction in fire behavior, and minimal fire growth towards the community.
But there is a second wildfire burning about 25 kilometers north of Fort Nelson, and it has been growing aggressively. Bogeen says it does not pose a threat to the community for now. In Manitoba, crews from Ontario have joined firefighting efforts near Cranberry Portage. The fire there has not grown in 2 days. It is within 2 kilometers of the town site. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is postponing all upcoming foreign visits. Ukrainian forces have had to pull back in Russia's offensive in the Kharkiv region. Moscow says it has taken control of 2 settlements in Kharkiv and 1 in the Zaporizhia region. Zelensky had a scheduled visit to Spain and Portugal this week. Government sources of both countries say the Ukrainian leader canceled, but did not give a reason. Russia's president is making his first trip overseas since starting his new 6-year term. Vladimir Putin is heading to Beijing. The visit showcases Moscow's reliance on China for support. Journalist Yana Li reports.
On the streets of China's capital, Russia's president has plenty of admirers. He's a very capable person. Another said people in China think he's formidable. Vladimir Putin's face-to-face with Xi Jinping is his 4th since the two declared a no-limits partnership between Moscow and Beijing just before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Xi hasn't openly declared support for the war, but he defended China's close relationship with the Kremlin during his recent tour of Europe. The two countries have also expanded economic ties. It's helped Moscow weather unprecedented sanctions imposed by the West, but that's coming under pressure. Chinese customs data showed exports to Russia dipped in March and April, following warnings from Washington that Chinese banks aiding the war in Ukraine could face secondary sanctions. Several lenders have slowed transactions. Some have halted business altogether.
So Russia really needs from
Frank Piker is an expert on China at the National University of Singapore and says Putin wants to address trade volumes with Beijing.
That includes strategic goods that it needs for the war machine, but it also includes food, products, consumer durables, and so on and so forth.
But under growing international scrutiny, the limits of their partnership could be put to test, particularly as China wants to avoid any negative impact on its own struggling economy. Yana Li for CBC News, Beijing.
In France, hundreds of police officers are searching for a prisoner who escaped yesterday and also the gunman who made it possible. It happened following a deadly ambush on a police van. Megan Williams has the details.
The audacious ambush took place just after 11 Tuesday morning at a highway toll booth near the French city of Rouen. A stolen Peugeot blocked a prison van carrying an inmate known as La Mouche, the Fly, real name Mohamed Amra. Gunmen wearing balaclavas leapt out of the car and another following the van, shooting to death 2 prison guards and seriously wounding 3 others before fleeing with Amra.
Il est très connu de la justice. Son casier judiciaire porte mention de 13 condamnations.
French public prosecutor Laure Becquieu said Amra was on his way from prison to court when the ambush took place. She says the 30-year-old has been convicted 13 times, mostly for burglary. French police say he's a well-known drug dealer with connections to a gang in the southern French city of Marseille. Amra's lawyer told French TV that Amra had tried to escape from prison 2 days earlier by sawing through the bars of his cell. Meanwhile, prison guards in Occitanie, southern France, have blocked all entrances and exits to prisons in the region in the wake of yesterday's attack. They're calling for more resources and armored vans they say are needed to better safeguard them from violent attacks. Megan Williams, CBC News, Paris.
International troops are expected to arrive in Haiti in the coming days. Some trained by the Canadian forces are on a mission to help restore order. That country is now one of the most violent places in the world. Armed gangs control almost all of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The CBC's Paul Hunter is in Cap-Haïtien, where many say help cannot come soon enough.
At a bustling, dusty, garbage-lined intersection in central Cap-Haïtien, police randomly stop vehicles looking for gang members. It's a key part of this city's efforts to keep gangs away from this place, as those gangs continue their fierce grip on Port-au-Prince, sitting just the other side of the mountains south of Cap-Haïtien. Gangs have left Haiti broadly in near complete disarray and misery. There is no functioning government. Kidnappings, rapes, murders are rampant in the capital. And those here in Cap-Haïtien are now ever more enraged. Their country is spiraling out of control.
They whip them, they kill them, they destroy us.
Gregory Rene, whose 3 daughters are in Port-au-Prince, says international help, like the forces from multiple countries expected soon, some trained by the Canadian military, are needed urgently.
We need job, we need hospital, we need education, we need to live like a human beings.
I just hope, we're told by Pierre Evreau's, mayor of Cap-Haïtien, that the international plan to help Haiti focuses on more than just Port-au-Prince. We also need help. And so this country waits for that help more desperately by the day. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Cap-Haïtien, Haiti.
And finally, greater gender diversity in operating rooms could mean better health outcomes for patients. That is according to a new study published in the British Journal of Surgery. Canadian researchers looked at the impact of gender diversity in surgical teams. They found that it can make a difference in patients' health care. CBC Health reporter Tashana Reid has the details.
Canadian researchers examined a decade of administrative data from Ontario hospitals, looking at more than 700,000 patients who underwent major elective surgeries. They found at hospitals with more than 35% female anesthesiologists and surgeons, there was a 3% reduction in major health complications, including death, within 3 months of surgery.
Where we have more diverse people in a team, that will increase the performance of that team because you're able to draw from different perspectives, skill sets.
Dr. Julie Allais is lead author and an associate professor of surgery at the University of Toronto. She says while more women were entering medical schools, during the 10-year study period, the number of female anesthesiologists and surgeons only increased by 5%. Researchers say more recruitment, promotion, and retainment of women in surgical teams should be prioritized. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
This is CBC.
This is CBC. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcuso. You're listening to Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Another cloudy start and another rainy day ahead. Thanks for joining us. So we'll get into the actual forecast in a moment. This hour on the show, remembering Alice Munro. We're going to talk to a novelist about the life and legacy of Alice Munro, a literary giant, the master of the short story who died earlier this week. It was publicly announced yesterday. In addition, a look at the gaps in the federal government's proposed national flood insurance program. I know we have fires on our mind right now, but we're going to have a look at this. And as we talk to a professor from the University of Waterloo who's been studying this problem, so stay tuned. And on our medical column this morning, there's a pill for your animals to try and prevent Lyme disease if they have a tick on their body. But what about for humans? Well, there's a trial that Dr. Raj Bhardwaj will tell us all about. So stay tuned. That's on the medical column just before 7. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Good morning, everyone. Let's get to Heather Wells, who's in with more news headlines and details. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, he says it is a dramatic and serious situation. Manitoba's premier getting a first-hand look at the fire zone in northwest Manitoba yesterday. Wab Kinew met with some evacuees from Cranberry Portage in the Paw, promising them support as long as they need. We'll hear more about what happened on that tour of the fire zone. And we are now hearing it's going to be around 7:30 this morning before hydro is restored to customers in the Fort Richmond area. Manitoba Hydro says power went out around 11:30 last night, impacting almost 3,000 hydro customers. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, including our own Abby Adiyemi, that's your end of town. Have you been up all night?
I know, I was like zombified from like 11:30, if that's a thing. Like the emergency light and the screaming sound that came with it just made that sound all night still this morning.
So you live in a larger building, so it wasn't like there was a neighborhood siren going off in your building because of the hydro issues.
Yeah,
you had flashing lights and sirens.
Yeah, it just had that flashing light, and then I tried accessing the box, but it's something the firefighters can only.
Of course, you tried to fix it technically.
I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna like put the pillows around my ears and just try to sleep off.
How many hours was that alarm ringing?
I started with it at 11:30.
Yep.
And then I tried falling asleep, and I thought I'd had enough sleep. At 1:30, I was up again, and it was still there.
Still on.
And then I snoozed again, and 2:30, I was up again.
Oh, no.
And then I woke up this morning, and it was still sticking with me. So I'm zombified this morning.
Fumbling around in the dark. So we'll get you some coffee because the lights are on here at CBC. What do we know about the weather, Abby?
Yeah, right now we are at 10 degrees. It's cloudy outside. We should expect some showers beginning later this morning. We're looking at around 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall with a high of 12 degrees. And that shower will be tapering off late in the evening, leaving us with cloudy skies and some fog patches we will be seeing overnight. So for tomorrow morning, that might be something we'll talk about. For tomorrow, it's going to be a mix of sun and clouds with fog patches. But for today, we're heading to a high of 12.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the traffic situation. Corey.
Well, bleary-eyed Abby this morning also told me that on your ride in, he also was nice enough to give us the traffic report that the lights, because of that outage,
are out. Course.
Yeah, of course, at the corner of Pembina and Dalhousie, as well as the intersection of Pembina and Killarney. And now that hydro, as we heard from Heather, is expected, the outage is expected to be back on by 7:30. So I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the morning. So, but up until 7:30, those lights very well may still be out. That is, of course, on Pembina and Dalhousie and Pembina and Killarney. And so you can imagine that's probably going to cause some pretty decent backups for folks. So heads up on that. So all that lack of sleep was worth it, Abby, just for that update for folks. I really appreciate that. But if you see something else going on out there, be like Abby. Tell me what you see. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's get into the show this morning. As I mentioned, news that writer Alice Munro has died at the age of 92 started to be shared publicly yesterday. She was, of course, born in Wingham, Ontario. She published her first collection of short stories back in 1968. You've probably read one or two or three or more. She went on to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2013. And to talk about Munro's work and legacy, Heather O'Neill is with us. O'Neill is a novelist, short story writer, and former Canada Reads winner for her novel, Lullabies for Little Criminals, and she joins us today from Louisiana. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us via Zoom. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So when you think about Alice Munro, what do you think of?
I guess at first I think always of her characters. They always, each time you read one of her stories, they're so intimate and the characters are so alive, and I feel so much attachment to each of her young girls, her middle-aged women, her elderly women, whichever they are, because they always, she has an early book that was called Who Do You Think You Are? And I think that kind of encompasses a lot of her stories where you have these young women who everyone is telling them, you're not that special. There's nothing unusual about you. As a woman, your duty is to be a caregiver or a mother or a daughter, and you have all these responsibilities. But she always had these characters who were like, I just want to live for myself. I have these desires, and they always run away from home. They're always cheating on their husbands. They're a wicked bunch, but there's something so delightful about that. The idea that a woman could put her own desires first, which was radical in her time, and it's even radical now. So every time I read an Alice Munro story, I get just so excited about just being a woman in that sense of joy in just being able to enjoy oneself.
How did she reflect Canada in her writing in a way that you are thinking about?
It's interesting because she always wrote many of her stories from small towns in Ontario and some in BC. And sometimes she was referred to, people always tried to pigeonhole her as a woman writer or a regional writer. And she always got upset when people called her a regional writer. And it's true because she found, and one of the amazing things that she did was within these little towns and little domestic environments, she would hone in on life and describe it in a way that we saw it had all the major themes of a Shakespearean drama. And it was wonderful to be told that as a Canadian, wherever you lived, you could look at your environment, and from that you could create the most magnificent novels or short stories. And it made us feel as though we were the subjects of great literature.
Every writer obviously has their own unique voice, but I'm wondering, as a writer yourself, what did you take after you would read? Did you go to your own work then and think about, narrative, voice, character development? Because obviously you're not directly emulating because it's your voice now, but how did she impact your work?
Oh, it's funny. She has a way of writing. She takes the moments in life where that end up being crossroads, where you make a decision and then it ends up undoing your entire life and just putting you on a different trajectory. But we never realize those moments until much later. So she tells these grand stories, but these stories of lives, but then goes right in and puts a magnifying glass on those moments when someone decides to get on a train or have an affair or whatever it is. And there's so much drama in it. And then she speeds up the narrative. I don't know if anybody can emulate her. She's a kind of writer. It's just you watch what she does. And then, but actually, I remember once coming to a detail in her story. She had this young woman who was caught losing her virginity. Like, her family walks in and they all come in, and it's the aunts and the uncles and everybody's screaming because it's the 1950s and she's 19 years old. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And her character, she describes her sitting on the edge of the bed, and she was perfect. She describes her as perfectly naked. And there was something in that moment. And always whenever I write and stage something, I want my characters to have that. I would just want them to be perfectly naked, just alone in their existential truth, even though while everything's happening around.
I love that. For someone that hasn't read any of Alice Munro's work and they're thinking now, wow, why haven't I? Where would you suggest as a place to start?
Runaway is always a great one because it has that opening story, which is very dramatic. But I also like Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Marriage. And I think that was a book now as a middle-aged woman that when I came to, it has these older women who are just really like free and subversive and still shocking everyone. So that ended up being, I think now that's my new favorite.
Thank you so much, Heather, for remembering her in such a beautiful way this morning. Appreciate talking to you on the show this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Heather O'Neill with us via Zoom. She's a novelist, story writer, and former Canada Reads writer for her novel, Lullabies for Little Criminals. She joined us this morning from Louisiana to remember Alice Munro.
Narrative, lyric, heroic, romantic, verse, or prose. The 2024 CBC Poetry Prize is on. Send in your best unpublished poem or poetry collection. Up for grabs, cash prizes from the Canada Council for the Arts, a 2-week writing residency at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and your work published on CBC Books. Contest closes June 1st. For rules and more, go to cbcbooks.ca. The goalie who revolutionized hockey, the bravery of Lucille Ball,
And get a great big bottle of Vitamita Vegemin tomorrow.
and Larry David, well, being Larry.
Shut up!
Sometimes Terry O'Reilly finds great stories in his research books that didn't quite fit into regular episodes. Until now. Bookmarks 2024 on Under the Influence. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
6:21 a.m. is the time right now. We find ourselves in the middle of the week. It is mostly cloudy still in Winnipeg, 10 degrees. We're expecting rain today again, 5 to 10 millimeters. So be ready for that. You've probably already got the right jacket and umbrella at the back door and the right shoes. We are still ahead on the program, going to be hearing from Wab Kinew. So that's going to be in the news. The Premier was in the air yesterday looking at the fire area. So we're going to hear more about that, in the news this morning at 6:30. We also are going to hear a little bit more between 6:30 and 7 about what everything looked like. In addition, I want to mention another story that we've been staying on top of. We're going to hear from a structural engineer on the program today. He's going to be talking about some of the factors that may have led to a Winnipeg apartment building being evacuated last week. We're talking about the Birchwood Terrace apartments. Remember last week how dramatic that was? People told to get out, saying it was structurally unsafe. The city putting up bulletins. So we're going to have a closer look at that story through the eyes of a structural engineer this morning. So stay tuned. That's coming up a little bit later on Information Radio. Right now, though, it is a morning where we're continuing to watch what's happening with the wildfire up north around Cranberry Portage. But spring often brings to mind not just fires, but flooding usually is what we're talking about before fires. Next on the show, that means a costly property damage to Canadian business owners will add up. Researchers over at the University of Waterloo examined the federal government's National Flood Insurance Program and found major gaps around affordability and availability. And to talk about it this morning, Jason Thistlethwaite is with us. He's a professor of the School of Environment, Enterprise and Development at the University of Waterloo. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So tell me a little bit more about what the current National Flood Insurance Program actually entails.
Right. So the challenge it's trying to address is that in Canada's highest risk of flood zones, private insurance is either unavailable, private insurers are not willing to offer it, or if they do, it's unaffordable. So the flood insurance program will allocate federal funds to insure properties in these high-risk areas. And in the event that people find those premiums are too expensive, will offer a subsidy for those people so that they can ensure that it is affordable.
Now, we know a lot about this in Manitoba because we've been through flood after flood, to be honest. But a lot of people might not be up on the very latest. So how do they evaluate what it means to be in a high-risk area?
Right. Yeah. Manitoba is definitely a veteran when it comes to flood risk in Canada, no doubt. And certainly one of the more proactive jurisdictions in trying to manage the risk. So it is a bit of an arbitrary definition of what is considered high risk. The insurance industry uses the top 10% of risk to be considered high risk. This is about 1.5 million homes or so. It actually the people we're most concerned about are people within a narrow band within those areas where we have a recurring problem whereby after a flood event happens, the funding that comes to them either from the province or the federal government is actually used to rebuild in the exact same way in the exact same area, creating a situation where you can have repeated losses. The insurance mechanism hopefully will come with a series of policy provisions that help reduce the risk that taxpayer dollars are going towards refunding development in these high-risk areas. It may involve, for instance, a lifetime cap on the amount of coverage that's available. But most predominantly, a risk signal. You'll be able to see the actual price and of what the risk is that you're likely to face, along with hopefully a sunset clause that says, in 10 years' time, we're going to reduce that subsidy. And that gives an incentive to individuals, but also the community to take measures to reduce the risk.
What is the current insurance plan missing? We've been using the word gap this morning.
Yeah, well, I think there are a few things that I'd like to see the federal government continue to work on as a part of the plan. In addition to transparency around what is the real rate of risk, we want to avoid a moral hazard. So we don't want to have a situation where people are paying a subsidized premium and are totally unaware that it actually is getting subsidized by taxpayer dollars. I'd like to see that there's a clear and transparent communication there. We need some policy supports, other changes in the way we manage disasters in Canada. An obvious one is ban future development in high-risk areas. Make sure that no future development in high-risk areas is included in an insurance program that is using taxpayer dollars to subsidize premiums. In areas where we have the highest risk, so this is the top 1%, and in fact, this is a real challenge because the top 1% actually accounts for about a third of all damage from flood risk in Canada. We need to be exploring such strategies like strategic relocation. So governments buying out property in these areas, and that can work with the insurance system. So an example might be that if you live in sort of this top 1% and you suffer a flood, the payment comes in, but it comes with a condition that you could also be eligible to sell your house to the government as well. That would be an ideal way of dealing with a situation like that. And then lastly, it isn't just high-risk areas that are underserved by insurance. We have a lot of communities that aren't able to afford insurance because we have a lack of data, frankly. We have oftentimes a lack of data on Indigenous communities. We have a lack of data on why people who are facing existing socioeconomic barriers aren't purchasing insurance. And we can do a lot of investment to clarify that and then help improve the abundance and availability, affordability of coverage in these areas.
I very rarely remember actual relocation happening. I mean, in Manitoba, I think we had ice jams happening around Breezy Point that created sort of flooding years ago north of the city, and those folks didn't necessarily go back to the same stretch. There was also, but it doesn't happen that often. More often, people just wait for years and years and rebuild in a different way. So these wide swath of relocation plans can get very complicated because then you have to have everybody on board agreeing in neighborhoods to move. Is it happening anywhere else in Canada? That full relocation?
Yeah, absolutely. Quebec has taken definitely a leadership role in this place.
And did they buy people's properties? I'm just curious because that's always the concern, right? My property's worth nothing now.
Yeah, they did. So they said that if damage exceeds a certain threshold, above 50% of the property, they'd be willing to give up to $200,000 to purchase the property. Now, that isn't going to be enough in a lot of communities in Canada. Property obviously is worth a lot more. So it ultimately needs to be a local decision on how this works. The problem is that unlike in the US, where you can access federal funding through grants to help support the relocation, that doesn't yet exist in Canada. So we really need to tie relocation funding to the insurance program. So once people see that they are living at a high risk, they see that it's being communicated annually in their insurance premiums, that they then have this option. And it needs to be a good option. It can't be that, I live in this one area and I'm being forced to relocate. Well, I'm not going to be able to afford to move to anywhere else. So we need to incorporate local real estate conditions into these types of solutions. Again, for every dollar that you spend on risk mitigation, you save 6 to 12 in avoiding future flood risk disasters. So it's important.
In the meantime, do your homework on your policies. Thank you very much for being with us via Zoom from your home this morning. And good morning to you. I think that was your son that popped in.
Oh, yeah. Everyone was very interested to see what was going on here. Thanks, Marcy.
Thanks for being on CBC. Take care.
Bye now.
With us this morning, live via Zoom, that is Jason Thistlethwaite, Professor of School and Environment, Enterprise and Development at the University of Waterloo, talking about flooding. Well, we're about to hear about what's going on with the fire situation in the news. Just mention a couple things that are happening with traffic. So lights are going to be out at parts of Fort Richmond due to hydro issues. Pembina and Killarney and Pembina and Dalhousie specifically should be restored soon, within an hour. We'll hear more from Heather on that too. Also, because of the fires up North Highway 10 to 39 South, remember, still remains closed. 788-3093 if you want to reach us with anything else when it comes to the commute. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business, meantime, we have a story coming up, wants governments to rethink the concept of minimum wage. So we're going to get the details from Crystalie Ramlakan after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 10 degrees. We're not warming up very much again today, and those showers are sticking around 5 to 10 millimeters through the day and a high of just 12 this afternoon. He says it is a dramatic and serious situation. Manitoba's premier got a first-hand look at the fire zone in northwest Manitoba yesterday. Hundreds of people from Cranberry Portage still don't know when they can go home. Premier Canoe met with evacuees in the Paw. Some worry they're having to pay for their own hotel rooms and food. Wab Canoe says his government will help those who are displaced.
We are moderating our response to ensure that people are going to get the support that they need. In a response like this, the challenge is always about trying to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks.
Canoe says he has heard from those needing extra assistance, like seniors and people on fixed incomes. He says officials have started coordinating additional layers of response. Canoe also visited Flin Flon yesterday, met with firefighters, and saw the wildfire from a helicopter. Well, Joanne Head is one of the evacuees who spoke with the Premier yesterday. She's frustrated with how the evacuation's been managed. Head says it has been more difficult for seniors and those with health conditions whose concerns, she says, have been ignored.
I'm thankful that everybody in our community made it out safe and sound. But for us to be ignored the way and held for so long waiting for help, it was very hard on a lot of us.
Head says there should have been a more organized response to a wildfire like this because conditions have been dry and the area, she says, is always at risk of fires. Well, power is now back on in Cranberry Portage in that fire zone, but part of South Winnipeg is in the dark. We are hearing it's going to be around 7:30 before hydro is restored to customers in the Fort Richmond area. Manitoba Hydro says power went out around 11:30 last night, impacting almost 3,000 hydro customers. Now to the latest in the trial of a serial killer. But first, CBC has learned through the court proceedings Jeremy Skibitsky pronounces his name Skibitsky, so we will now reflect that pronunciation. Today, 3 people who lived in the same apartment building where Skibitsky killed 4 women are expected to testify. Skibitsky told police he strangled or drowned the women in his home and then disposed of their bodies in garbage bins. He's pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder for the slayings of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and an unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. His lawyers say he killed the 4 women but is not criminally responsible because of mental illness. Crown prosecutors say the killings were racially motivated and Skibitsky preyed on the vulnerable women at homeless shelters. A worker from one of the homeless shelters is also expected to speak later today during the trial. Some summer camps in Manitoba face an uncertain season after not getting provincial funding they'd expected. The province distributes grants through its Green Team program every year, but some camps received less funding this year or no funding at all. Kim Schurger at the Manitoba Camping Association says some camps had banked on the grants when they hired counselors and other staff, and now they worry they can't afford to pay those workers properly.
They think staff are going to walk away from the job because they need to make at least minimum wage in order to pay their tuition bills for university, whatever their living expenses are, things like that. So they're going to be scrambling now and trying to find work instead of just getting a small honorarium for working at camp.
Schurger says camps tell her they will try to appeal for more donations. Manitoba Municipal and Northern Affairs Minister Ian Bushy plans to meet with the association and says his priority is to ensure no camps close. Most Winnipeggers learned this week how much they owe in property taxes. The city says those notices are in the mail. Some property owners may notice their bill for school taxes isn't as high as last year. That's because the province is giving people their 50% rebate right on the bill instead of a check in the mail like the former PC government's rebate. Leo Derbrook offers tax services by house call. He says most people don't understand either versions, whether it's the NDPs or the PCs.
It's very confusing because the government gives it to you and then they give you a credit back. They're like, well, why do we have to pay it in the first place?
Next year, the government is scrapping the existing rebate and credit for a new credit of up to $1,500. But what will that mean for your household? You can learn more on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. The Edmonton Oilers beat the Vancouver Canucks last night in Game 4 of their second-round playoff series. Final score last night was 3-2. The series, as you heard there, now is tied at 2 games each. Game 5 is tomorrow in Vancouver. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Some fun Canadian hockey right there.
Don't you love that sound?
Yeah. I wish it were our team, but yeah.
Yes, me too.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get to the regional forecast. Abby Adeyemi, what is today going to bring?
Well, we are expecting rain. Expect showers to kick in this morning. We're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, and we're aiming for the high of 12 degrees. The showers will be easing off as we get to the night period, leaving us with cloudy skies and potential fog patches overnight. But right now in Winnipeg, we are at 10 degrees. It's cloudy outside, and as we head over to Brandon now, where it's also cloudy and currently 8 degrees. For folks in Brandon, you should be seeing a high of 15 today, and some showers will definitely make appearance. Moving north to Thompson, it is 6 degrees and mostly cloudy for folks there. You can look forward to a high of 19, and later in the day, you'll be getting some sunny breaks, and then a mix of sun and clouds would make an entrance. Further north in Churchill, where it's chilly at 0, mostly cloudy at the moment, we would see highs around 9 degrees, and of course, breaks of sunny conditions later also. Darwin is currently at 8 degrees and cloudy. We're seeing some fog patches dissipating this morning. You might see a mix of sun and clouds later, and then a slight chance of showers also coming. You'd get to a high of 18. Now, if we check out what's happening in Gimli, where it's 9 degrees and cloudy, the Interlake region will be seeing showers ending around the afternoon period, leaving behind cloudy skies and a high of 11. Steinbach is sitting at 10 degrees and cloudy. Showers on the way with amounts ranging from 10 to 15 millimeters, and we'll be seeing a high of 15. And finally, Morris, where it's 12 degrees and cloudy. For the Pembina Valley region, we should be seeing the showers beginning sometime this morning. For that region, we're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters of rain also, and a high of 15. Across board, we're seeing highs of around 12 to 15. Winnipeg is expecting showers this morning. We'll be getting to a high of 12, and the rain will be tapering off later tonight, bringing some fog patches.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into our commute details now with Corey Funk.
Yeah, so that power outage, I want to start with that in Fort Richmond area. As of at least Abby's ride in this morning, he told me that the lights at the corner of Pembina and Dalhousie and the corner of Pembina and McGillivray, that intersection, both of them are out because of that power outage. So treat that as a 4-way stop. And as you can imagine, that's probably going to cause some backups for folks this morning. The Hydro website says that estimated restoration time for that outage is 7:30 a.m. today. I'll be keeping an eye on that. I would love to get updates from folks who are out there, what they see. So they may cause issues further up Pembina as well. Got a call from RuPaul and Louise, who said that the corner of McGillivray and Pembina, just as you turn off Pembina, down McGillivray heading towards Route 90 in the left lane, an arm that controls whether you can go over the train tracks looks like it's been knocked down, and that's actually blocking the left lane heading towards Route 90 from Pembina down McGillivray. So keep right to get around that. Not too many backups yet, Louise says. So look for that. And if that's doesn't make your drive down Pembina any more fun, southbound Pembina at Plaza, there's construction in the median lane. So keep right to get, or keep left, sorry, to get keep right, sorry, to get around that. If you see something else going on, let me know. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
21 minutes to 7 o'clock, and Christy Ramlakan joins us via Zoom with our business news. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
Let's talk with minimum wage. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business wants governments to rethink the concept of minimum wage. In what way? What are they saying?
Well, the group says mandatory wage hikes do not actually address the affordability crisis. And in a new report today, the Federation says increases may be with good intention, but they have unintended consequences on small businesses. So it wants to see the minimum wage be tied to a percentage of the median wage. And the CFIB says that would better reflect what's actually happening with wages in the labor market. Beatrix Abdulaziz is a policy analyst with CFIB, and she says governments should increase basic personal amounts. So that's the amount of income you can earn before you must start paying taxes, and reduce personal income tax.
Well, for small businesses, it places an additional cost burden on them. We surveyed our members and asked them what the impact of the last minimum wage increase was. And for 6 out of 10, they actually had to increase the prices of goods and services that they offer, which adds to the inflationary pressure in the economy.
So the CFIB says government policies aimed at easing the housing crisis, reducing the cost of energy, and increasing the supply of food would be more effective.
Let's go to another story. Almost 1 million Canadians are starting to receive payments from a class action lawsuit. What is this about?
Well, people who applied to be part of a class action lawsuit against Life Labs are now receiving their checks and e-transfers. KPMG is administering the claims, and it says more than 900,000 valid claims were received. So given that large number of valid claims, people will only receive an e-transfer of $7.86. And those receiving a check are only going to get $5.86 after the $2 processing fee. Now, this class action was launched after a 2019 data breach that allowed hackers to access the personal information of up to 15 million customers. An Ontario court approved a Canada-wide settlement of up to $9.8 million. And Life Labs has said that most of the affected customers were in Ontario and British Columbia. Now, in 2020, the BC and Ontario privacy commissioners ordered Life Labs to improve how it safeguards personal health information and to collect less of it from customers. So something else did come of this lawsuit. And of course, these payments were significantly smaller than many had been expecting. When the settlement was approved last fall, people were told they would be eligible for about $50 up to a maximum of $150. Of course, legal fees and taxes would be deducted, but the precise amount is determined on how many claims were filed, and so many claims were filed.
Finally, a mainstay at Chuck E. Cheese is going away.
Yes, so the animatronic band at the pizza and arcade chain is going to be phased out by the end of the year at all but 2 of the locations in the U.S. So there's more than 400 locations south of the border. And for decades, these life-size mascots have performed for children, and the band of robot puppets have been an iconic part of the business. But the CEO says this change is part of the largest and most aggressive transformation for the business. So replacing the band will be more screens, digital dance floors, and trampoline gyms. And I looked into it. The animatronics will still be in Canada, though, where they have them until 2025, when the company plans to start remodeling locations here. Now, the pandemic forced many locations to temporarily close, and the company actually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the summer of 2020. And since then, its leaders have been trying to adapt Chuck E. Cheese to a more modern era. The first one opened in 1977 in San Jose, California, and today it has more than 600 locations in 16 countries. But, Marcy, the restaurant hasn't said what will happen to those robots after they're removed from hundreds of locations.
There's got to be some theme park full of the animatronic stuff, right? Because you got to think like Disney parks have had to probably overhaul everything, because that's what all of Disney used to be too back in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, maybe they could put them somewhere that'd be like nostalgic for like older people to go to.
Yeah. What's going on in the markets this morning?
In Europe, markets are slightly higher as global investors look ahead to the latest U.S. inflation data. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is down. In Asia, markets are mixed, even as Wall Street gains overnight saw the NASDAQ Composite Index hit a fresh record closing high. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is down. Oil is down 43 cents to $77.59 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $11.60 to $2,371.90 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is up almost 1/10 cent to 73.35 cents U.S.
That'll do it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
It's Crystal Ramlichan with our business news. 6:44 a.m. is the time. Currently, I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Thanks so much for joining us. Another great day in Winnipeg. We are expecting rain. Now, up in the flood zone, there's just a chance, pardon me, I'm so used to saying floods at this time of year. Up in the fire zone, there's just a chance that there's going to be showers in northwest Manitoba outside the Cranberry Portage area. But man, they could use it. What a difficult week it's been for residents of Cranberry Portage. Hundreds of residents fleeing the town over the weekend as that nearby wildfire threatening their homes. Yesterday, Premier Wab Kinews, you've been hearing in the news, had a chance to see the nearly 32,000 hectare fire zone firsthand from a helicopter. So he viewed it from the air. On ground, he also spoke with evacuees. Now, shortly after he landed back at the St. Andrews Airport yesterday evening, the Premier told reporters what he saw and what he heard.
You have some folks who are sitting there with a smile on their face, despite the fact that they've been forced to leave their homes under threat of those very, very real wildfire dangers that we all have seen, but they're sitting there with a smile on their face, joking around with friends and relatives. You have other folks who are frustrated, understandably so. They're feeling that this situation is, really, really trying. And then you have other folks who are sad. We saw tears today as well, too, from folks who are very upset. So the thing that I really took out of it, though, is the human impact. Whether folks are responding with tears or with, just kind of laughing and saying, what else can you do sort of thing. I do think that everyone in the region has been through a lot, including the first responders, the wildfire fighters who've been going pretty much all out over the weekend. You have folks who've been asked to leave, in some cases with 20 minutes notice, and trying to make arrangements for being out of your home for potentially weeks, and that amount of time is a challenge. Then you add onto that folks living on fixed income, seniors on pensions, folks who might be on what we call employment and income assistance. And so we are moderating our response to ensure that people are going to get the support that they need. In a response like this, the challenge is always about trying to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks. And in the PAW in particular, where there were tons of people who came south from Cranberry Portage, we heard a lot about folks who need that extra bit of assistance. Of course, the situation in Flin Flon, no less serious, because again, they're welcoming evacuees, but they don't have cell service right now to be able to coordinate the effort. So while we were on the ground, we didn't have cell service either. Once we did get back into cell service, we were able to start coordinating with provincial officials, and within the hour, we were able to stand up additional layers of response. So that's going to be a continued effort. We're at that 72-hour point, give or take, of course, where people have been in hotels. Some folks may be asked to move to Dauphin, further south, Brandon, Winnipeg, other locations. And again, just ensuring that folks get the support that they need during this difficult period of time. To me, it comes down to this. Folks are stressed out. It's been a very trying, difficult experience. We're going to just try and make it that much easier for folks who've been through so much already. The supports that people need are around housing, shelter. A lot of folks are staying in hotels. Some people have sourced their own accommodations. But again, to be very clear, if you need a place to stay, that will be provided for you. Food will be provided for you. We saw in the PAW, again, a very big gathering place at the reception center where people are coming together to access emergency social supports, healthcare supports, be tied into whatever service that they need. And so we're going to be there to ensure that that response is coordinated, properly resourced. And then, of course, people are wondering about a potentially longer stay away from home. We're going to ensure that the provisions for food and shelter are in place there. And also, again, looking ahead, hopefully, when people can return home, that there'll be some help on that side too. I think the thing that really jumps out at me is that this is early in a potential wildfire season. Talking to the experts, like the folks with years of wildfire fighting experience on the ground, I guess their rule of thumb is typically a May-long weekend. Here we are ahead of that, and we've already had a major blaze, large-scale evacuation, hundreds and hundreds of folks who are registered, and then again, the number's probably higher because there are at least some folks who haven't registered formally to access services as evacuees. So again, I think it's important to strike the right balance between taking it serious and not wanting to downplay any sort of risk to the wildfire season. But at the same time, we need to be alert and we need to be prepared for what may potentially be a worst case scenario in the future. So with that in mind, the fact that the wildfire season has started earlier than is typical, I think that does mean that we're going to have to really lean into ensuring that all the resources are there to fight the fires and that the supports are there for evacuees when they need them.
That was Premier Rob Canoe after his tour of the fire zone near Cranberry Portage yesterday. He was up in the air looking at things. In the next hour of Information Radio, we will talk to the director of Manitoba Wildfire Services for an update this morning and also find out about the firefighters that have arrived here from other provinces. Just a reminder, there is still an air quality statement that's been issued for around the Paw, Wanless, Cranberry Portage, Leaf and Puck because of the fire burning there. So take those proper precautions if you have to be indoors or close windows or wear masks even. It is 10 to 7 right now on 89.3. Big power outage across Fort Richmond. We'll let you know when hydro is restored there. It's affecting some things in traffic. Pembina and Killarney and Pembina and Dalhousie specifically, you might have lights out there and through that area. So we'll update that. Also, because of fires in the North Highway, 10 to 39 south remains closed this morning. If you have anything else on your Wednesday commute, 788-3093 is where you can reach us here at CBC. Well, next on the show, as our days get longer and the weather continues to get warmer, many of us are spending more time outside, whether that's gardening or walking or hiking or hanging out. Ticks are really active, though, at this time of year. The season actually started early in Manitoba, as we've been reporting. And with May long weekend around the corner, that's the topic of today's medical column with Dr. Raj Bhardwaj. Now, we often end up talking about ticks at this time of year, so just remind us of why that is.
They're becoming more active. We're becoming more active. So, we're crossing paths more frequently. And every once in a while, somebody gets sick from a tick bite. Tick bites are gross, but they can also be dangerous. So not all ticks carry disease, but some ticks are infected with germs that they can transmit to us that we need to know about. So Lyme disease is the infection that gets the most press, I think. But there are other infections like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and anaplasmosis, and there's a whole bunch. If you ever want to freak yourself out, just Google tick-borne diseases. But, most of them can cause pretty similar symptoms, fever and chills and headaches and muscle and joint pains. But the symptoms can vary. Not all of them give a specific rash or anything like that. And it's hard to make the diagnosis sometimes. So it's important to know, things like, was a tick on you? Which kind of tick was it? Things like that. So just, building awareness is going to be important.
Now, we had a vet on recently who was talking about, people who have dogs or cats can give their pets a pill once a month to prevent Lyme disease. Why doesn't something like that exist for humans?
Right. That would be so nice. So the cool thing about the medicine that's used for pets is that it doesn't kill the Lyme disease bacteria, it kills the tick. So the idea is, you give your dog a pill once a month or once every 3 months or whatever. That medicine is harmful to insects, to ticks, but not harmful to mammals like your dog or cat or human. So the medicine gets absorbed into the dog. And if a tick bites them and starts to suck their blood, then the medicine gets into the tick and it kills the tick before it can transmit the germs that cause Lyme disease. So there isn't a similar drug for humans yet, but a small trial is being done in humans, and there are some limited results. Unfortunately, the results are only available by press release, not in any peer-reviewed published trials that I could find, but the results are promising. So basically, they took 30 volunteers, they were given this pill that is being investigated, and then they had a tick put on them, either the day after the pill or 30 days after the pill. And in about 90% of people, the tick died quickly enough that if it had been infected with Lyme bacteria, the bacteria would not have had time to get into the human. So this medicine doesn't kill the Lyme disease bacteria, it kills the tick, similar to the once-a-month medicines that vets can prescribe for your pets. So the idea would be to use this medicine, if it ever gets approved, to use the medicine during tick season, at the beginning of tick season or before you travel to a high-risk area if you're not in a high-risk area already. And it's a promising development, but there's still going to be a bunch more trials that need to be done to prove that it's safe and effective. So I think we still need to work on prevention preventing the tick bites and removing the ticks before they have a chance to transmit infections to us, because this medicine is at least a few years off.
All right, let's do the annual how to remove a tick conversation.
So I was thinking about, how when you get a price tag on something and you're trying to take the price tag off, but without shearing the price tag. And so you pull on it slowly. That's what you need to do with a tick, because the tick, the mouth parts and the head are in your, just under your skin. And the tick's saliva gets kind of gluey if it's been feeding for a while. So you have to pull on it slowly, and you got to be patient. It can take 10 or 15 seconds of it sort of, its legs kind of writhing while you're pulling on it. But what you want to do is don't use your fingernails like you would for like a price tag. You want to use a narrow pair of tweezers or a tick key. You want to get a hold of it as close to your skin as possible. So run the tweezers along your skin, and you don't want the tweezers going along the tick's body. You want it going across the tick body, because basically you don't want to squeeze its belly. So you grab it from the side, you pull slowly, pull straight up. And then afterwards, don't just throw it away or squish it or whatever. Load up your phone with eTick. It's an app that is part of a public platform for identifying and monitoring ticks in Canada. There's also a great website, etick.ca, that has all sorts of pictures and important info. But you submit a picture of the tick, and they'll ask you, where were you, when you removed it, things like that. And they'll help to identify the tick for you. And then you'll know, is this a tick that can carry certain types of disease? And then depending on where you live, you can submit the tick for testing. And depending on a lot of factors, we might prescribe antibiotics just in case, since Lyme disease is treatable and it's easier to treat if we do it early. Not all of them are dangerous, but the problem is that we still need to be aware of them and remove them quickly to lower the risks of infections from tick bites.
And what's your advice for preventing tick bites?
The easiest thing is to use insect repellents, but proper ones, the ones with DEET or Picardin or Icardin, they work really, really well. There's a lot of stuff going around this time of year, especially on like Instagram and TikTok, about using, different essential oils and stuff like that, and making your own concoction. Just go buy the insect repellent. It works really, really well. You can also treat your hiking or gardening clothes with another repellent called permethrin, which stays effective even after washing. And then when you come indoors, pop your clothes into the dryer for 10 minutes. Your dry clothes in the dryer, 10 minutes on hot, will kill ticks. So will washing the clothes, of course, but you have to wash them in hot water. There's also evidence that if you shower within 2 hours after coming indoors, that can reduce your risk of contracting Lyme disease. Because if the ticks aren't well attached, they can get washed off in the shower. You can do a tick check in the shower at the same time. So simple prevention tip, check your crevices. And daily.
All right, Dr. Barwash, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's our medical column. Let's go now for our headlines to Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, he says it is a dramatic and serious situation. Manitoba's premier got a first-hand look at the fire zone in northwest Manitoba yesterday. Wab Canoe met with some of the evacuees at from Cranberry Portage. They are in the PAW, and he promises them support as long as they need. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the owners of Food Fair are holding a news conference later this morning after a police incident last night. In a release, the AMC says it wants to address a recent incident of violence at that grocery store on Portage Avenue. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
10 degrees in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy, about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain expected. Fort Richmond still without power, so we'll stay on top of that. You might have some lights out in some of the area. And of course, Highway 10 around the around the fire area still remains closed south to 39. In the next hour of the program, we're going to hear from a local Palestinian student about her plans to commemorate Nakba Day, which is today. In addition, at 7:40 today, we're going to meet one of the people who's receiving the Order of Manitoba this year. It was just announced on the weekend. He is a local firefighter and a fighter for his community as well. Chad Swayze is his name. We're going to talk to him as he joins us live in studio. And we will also have a discussion with the Director of Manitoba Wildfire Services for a live update today just before 8 o'clock on what's happening in the north. Stay tuned.
The Current.
Some of these reservoirs that the farmers rely on are basically empty, and that includes one of the largest, the St. Mary Reservoir south of Lethbridge.
Alberta is running low on water with a low snowpack and drying riverbeds, and that is leaving farmers turning to water trading in what is becoming a competitive market. The fight for water in Alberta and who should get priority on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. More than 6,000 people are under evacuation order and out of their Fort McMurray homes. Some are fleeing wildfire for a second time. They say it is bringing back memories of the fire known as the Beast in 2016. Alex Mortlock is one of them.
Nothing can prepare you, I don't think. Still the same anxiety, same things going through your mind, and this time I have kids to worry about.
The wildfire threatening Fort Mac is nearly 21,000 hectares in size. Shifting winds are pushing it closer to the community. But the regional fire chief says this fire is much less volatile than the Beast. It is burning low to the ground and slowly through areas that have been burned before. Fire officials in British Columbia say conditions for fighting the flames around Fort Nelson are favorable. Ben Bogeen is a fire behavior specialist. He says the fire closest to Fort Nelson is still just 2 kilometers away.
Reduced winds have resulted in favorable firefighting conditions, a reduction in fire behavior, and minimal fire growth towards the community.
But there is a second wildfire burning about 25 kilometers north of Fort Nelson, and it's been growing aggressively. Bogeen says it does not pose a threat to the community for now. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is getting a picture of what his summer could look like. The wildfire-threatening Cranberry Portage is staying in place at this time, but the flames are very close to the small northwestern community. And Kinew got a look at it all from above. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh has that story.
Taking to the air to assess what's happening on the ground.
Oh yeah, you can really see the flames now, eh? Yeah, it's starting to build up.
Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew flying over the fire area just south of Flin Flon, getting an in-air briefing from fire officials.
It's been really dry, so it's all just like a campfire, dead fuel, just ready to ignite.
An area about 31,000 hectares, or 310 square kilometers, is burning here, coming within 2 kilometers of the small community of Cranberry Portage.
When you see firsthand how close it got to Cranberry, it really tells you how serious the situation is.
Since the weekend, favorable winds have kept the fire from spreading, letting fire crews ramp up. 50 firefighters from Ontario have arrived to help, as about 550 nervous evacuees waited out.
We help each other out and make sure we're all right.
Heather Murray managed to find a hotel room in Flin Flon for a couple of nights. She's not sure where she's going to end up.
Tomorrow we have one more night at the hotel, so thinking about tenting it somewhere.
The fire is burning hot and deep. It could take weeks to put out. With much of Manitoba's boreal forest under drought conditions, Kinew says his government is preparing for a long fire season.
The thing that stands out for me is how early in the year we are.
This likely just the first fire tour he may be taking this year. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Kyiv. He has just announced an additional $2 billion for its war effort.
We put this together in a first-of-its-kind defense enterprise fund, and it has three components. One is to provide weapons today. Two, investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base, helping to strengthen even more its capacity to produce what it needs for itself, but also to produce for others. And finally, using this fund to help Ukraine purchase military equipment from other countries, not just the United States.
Blinken says the money is coming at a critical time. Russia is opening a new front in the war. He says the United States is focused on making sure Ukrainian troops will continue to get Patriot missiles and other forms of air defense. In France, hundreds of police officers are searching for a prisoner who escaped yesterday and also the gunmen who made it possible. It happened following a deadly ambush on a police van. Megan Williams has the details.
The audacious ambush took place just after 11 Tuesday morning at a highway toll booth near the French city of Rouen. A stolen Peugeot blocked a prison van carrying an inmate known as La Mouche, the Fly, real name Mohamed Amra. Gunmen wearing balaclavas leapt out of the car and another following the van, shooting to death 2 prison guards and seriously wounding 3 others before fleeing with Amra.
Il est très connu de la justice. Son casier judiciaire porte mention de 13 condamnations.
French public prosecutor Laure Becpieux said Amra was on his way from prison to court when the ambush took place. She says the 30-year-old has been convicted 13 times, mostly for burglary. French police say he's a well-known drug dealer with connections to a gang in the southern French city of Marseille. Amra's lawyer told French TV that Amra had tried to escape from prison 2 days earlier by sawing through the bars of his cell. Meanwhile, prison guards in Occitanie, southern France, have blocked all entrances and exits to prisons in the region in the wake of yesterday's attack. They're calling for more resources and armored vans they say are needed to better safeguard them from violent attacks. Megan Williams, CBC News, Paris.
International troops are expected to arrive in Haiti in the coming days. Some trained by the Canadian forces are on a mission to help restore order. That country is now one of the most violent places in the world. Armed gangs control almost all of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The CBC's Paul Hunter is in Cap-Haïtien, where many say help cannot come soon enough.
At a bustling, dusty, garbage-lined intersection in central Cap-Haïtien, police randomly stop vehicles looking for gang members. It's a key part of this city's efforts to keep gangs away from this place, as those gangs continue their fierce grip on Port-au-Prince, sitting just the other side of the mountains south of Cap-Haïtien. Gangs have left Haiti broadly in near complete disarray and misery. There is no functioning government. Kidnappings, rapes, murders are rampant in the capital. And those here in Cap-Haïtien are now ever more enraged. Their country is spiraling out of control.
They rape them, they kill them, they destroy us.
Gregory Rene, whose 3 daughters are in Port-au-Prince, says international help, like the forces from multiple countries expected soon, some trained by the Canadian military, are needed urgently.
We need job, we need hospital, we need education, we need to live like a human beings.
I just hope, we're told by Pierre Evreau's, mayor of Cap-Haïtien, that the international plan to help Haiti focuses on more than just Port-au-Prince. We also need help. And so this country waits for that help more desperately by the day. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Cap-Haïtien, Haiti.
Internet personality DJ Academics is being sued for sexual assault and defamation. A woman alleges she was drugged and assaulted by 2 of his friends before Academics himself assaulted her in 2022 at his home. He has denied all allegations. DJ Academics hosts a podcast and has become a controversial figure in pop culture. He's been accused of spreading misinformation. He also supported convicted Canadian rapper Tory Lanez during his trial for shooting Megan Thee Stallion. And finally, greater gender diversity in operating rooms could mean better health outcomes for patients. That's according to a new study published in the British Journal of Surgery. Canadian researchers looked at the impact of gender diversity in surgical teams. They found that it can make a difference in patients' health care. CBC Health reporter Tashana Reid has the details.
Canadian researchers examined a decade of administrative data from Ontario hospitals, looking at more than 700,000 patients who underwent major elective surgeries. They found at hospitals with more than 35% female anesthesiologists and surgeons, there was a 3% reduction in major health complications, including death, within 3 months of surgery.
Where we have more diverse people in a team, that will increase the performance of that team because you're able to draw from different perspectives, skill sets.
Dr. Julie Allais is lead author and an associate professor of surgery at the University of Toronto. She says while more women were entering medical schools, during the 10-year study period, the number of female anesthesiologists and surgeons only increased by 5%. And half of the hospitals included in the study had less than 35% women in those roles.
We have a lot of work to do to increase the presence of female anesthesiologists and surgeons within hospital teams so that the patients can benefit from it.
Dr. Saru Sharda is an anesthesiologist and leads equity and inclusion work at McMaster University's Medical School.
It's great that we're thinking about women, but we really need to be thinking about how those experiences in the operating room team are different for racialized women, are different for Black women, are different for Indigenous women, because we're not a monolith.
Researchers say more recruitment, promotion, and retainment of women in surgical teams should be prioritized. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us here on CBC's Information Radio. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Light rain falling in Portage, and it's coming here. So we'll talk more about the forecast, of course, this hour. Now, when it comes to where we need rain, there's just a chance of showers in northwestern Manitoba today outside Cranberry Portage. This hour, we're going to get a full interview with the director of Manitoba Wildfire Services for an update. As you've been hearing on World Report, a number of different firefighters now are here from out of province trying to help with that ongoing fight. And the Premier was in the area yesterday, so stay tuned. In addition, this hour on the show, a Winnipeg firefighter on a totally different story. He is one of the 12 Manitobans who will receive the Order of Manitoba this year for his work in community. He'll talk about how he started firefighting and how he overcame some mental health challenges along the way as well. So stay tuned for that. And in a moment, we actually are also going to have a conversation with a local Palestinian student here in Manitoba about her plans to commemorate Nakba Day, which is today. So stay tuned for that. Right now, Heather Wells joins us from our CBC Manitoba News Center. 7:11 is the time. And what's developing in news, Heather?
Good morning. Yes. Well, Manitoba's premier saw the wildfire zone of northwest Manitoba firsthand in a helicopter tour yesterday. He met with some people forced out of Cranberry Portage on the weekend. Joanne Head is one of the evacuees who spoke with the premier in the PAW. She's frustrated with how the evacuation was managed. We'll hear more from her. Some summer camps in Manitoba are scrambling after expected provincial funding fizzled.
For them to do this right now to us is sort of like a thumb in the face, like they don't know what we do.
David sprints at Camp Masad at Sandy Hook after the province denied funding for this year's camp. The province says the Green Team program received a record number of applications and there's just so much money to go around. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
We used to rent a cabin up at Sandy Hook when I was a kid,
Is that
Heather.
right?
Yeah, but you know when you're little and you just have sort of spotty memories of what it was like? All I remember is my dad creating these colossal sandwiches. He would call them the cottage sandwiches, and he'd be like, "Kids, what more can we put on?" And it would be like 13 layers of peanut butter and pickles and meat and all kinds of things. My dad would put anything in his belly, and we'd all go, "Whoa, no way!" Fond memories.
You should have done those food eating contests. That's what it sounds like.
Oh, he would have cleaned up. Yeah, he would have cleaned up. Should have never become an accountant. All right, let's get into what's happening with the weather forecast. Abby Adeyemi is here to talk about the rain that's coming.
Yeah, we're heading to a high of 12 degrees, currently 11 in the city, and it's cloudy. We're expecting mainly cloudy conditions with us before the showers this morning, and we're looking at around 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall for the day. Tonight, we will see showers which will be tapering off later in the evening, leaving us with more cloudy skies, and you just need to be mindful of the fog patches that will be developing overnight. So I'll just tell you, we're starting off with showers this morning, and then there's some transition into mainly cloudy skies. We'll hit the high of 12, and then it's going to taper off tonight and leave us with fog patches.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
So we have a number of things going on in the commute, and one of the things that's being affecting things is the power outage, right, Corey?
That's
Fort Richmond?
Right, exactly. So South Pembina, Fort Richmond area, there is a power outage, and that is impacting the traffic as well. So the intersections of Dalhousie and Killarney, I know Abby takes his way down there. They were totally out this morning, and the power outage is still going on. So that could be impacting your commute. That is a four-way stop. The Hydro website says that power is expected to be restored in that area by 7:30. So let's hope that that's cleared up in 15 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on that. Would love to get calls on what people are seeing there. Further up Pembina, at the corner of Pembina and McGillivray, actually particularly on McGillivray itself, when you're turning from Pembina heading towards Route 90, there is a train arm, I guess, like the arm that stops you from crossing the tracks, has actually been knocked down. And that's actually blocking the left lane heading westbound towards Route 90 from Pembina down McGilvery. So keep right to get around that. Heard from RuPaul and Louise that it wasn't causing too many delays as of at least about 45 minutes ago. Might be different now as traffic starts to pick up. So that may be an issue for folks as well. If you see something else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC community line. We'd love to get an update, particularly on what's going on with that power outage on South Pembina there. That is going both ways at Dalhousie and Killarney. Keep that in mind. Those intersections are out. See something, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, today is Nakba Day. Nakba, which is Arabic for catastrophe, is recognized as a dark day by Palestinians. It is a day where they mark when many fled or were displaced from their homes in the war over Israel's creation in 1948. Now, Mona Zangana is a Palestinian student who lives here in Winnipeg, and she says that today for her brings her mixed feelings of pride, but also of sadness. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
What's the personal connection you have to Nakba Day? Tell me a bit about your family.
So my family's lineage began like in the displacement during the Nakba. My late grandparents had their 4 eldest kids over there, and during the Nakba they fled and sought refuge in Jordan, where the rest of their family, my aunts and uncles, as well as my mother, they were born there. So the only person from my mom's side of the family who are able to actually go visit Palestine are my mom and my aunt, because they hold Canadian citizenships, while the rest of them, they're not allowed entry. They're basically in exile out of Palestine. They're not allowed to go visit there. They can't live there. They basically can't enter there.
I mentioned you have mixed feelings on today, and in the past, when you think about past years when Nakba Day has come up, what do you feel and what do you think about?
Pretty much, this year is a little bit different for me. It's a 76th year. The reason that this year is different is because there's a little bit of a sense of hope that I have because of all the knowledge that the world has been receiving in the outrage that Palestine has been receiving, the support that they have been receiving. I've never seen outrage for Palestine like I have these past couple of months, so it's great. And I hope that's the first step towards us having to no longer commemorate the Nakba, and that what's happening in Palestine ceases, and that everybody can go back to their country, visit their country, and just live away from a genocide.
How does your family honor the day, and how have you gathered and discussed in past years? Is it a solemn day in your family, or as we mentioned, it can also be a day of pride?
My family they don't like to talk about it too much. It's a very sensitive topic for them. So pretty much what we do every year, there's always something that's happening in the community to commemorate the Nakba, whether it's a rally, a protest, a march. So we like to go and join just to, increase our numbers, show, the Canadian government that we're here. We do not support the genocide that's happening in it. And then usually my mom will give us stories and let us know, your grandma, this is what happened with your grandma, and this is how she used to live, and such like that.
Where can people find information? I know you do a lot of advocacy work in the community as well to spread education and awareness. So where can people find more information about honoring Nakba Day in Winnipeg?
People can typically follow these Instagram pages. There's CPAM. They do a ton of community work for Palestine, and to kind of spread the word and can't speak today. It's okay. Early. Yeah. They do a ton of community work with advocacy, and they do a ton of rallies, a ton of marches, a ton of speeches. So there's CPAM on Instagram.
And some of those events are happening as well, right? There's some vigils planned, I understand?
That's correct. On the 16th, there's one that's happening at the University of Manitoba to support the students who are holding an encampment out there. And on Saturday the 18th, there's also a Great March of Return that's happening.
Speaking of the encampments, what's it like for you to see those?
It's I'm very proud to see what's happening, and I also I feel for the students who are out there. They're very important because the universities have also been for the longest time a place of protest and advocacy. And there's been plenty of victories across the country with these encampments, and we hope that the University of Manitoba and the University of Winnipeg joins these the rest of these communities and universities to make a positive change and ensure that the academic community stands on the right side of history.
How tense are things in community right now? I've been interviewing community leaders about sort of obviously the deep politics, the history, what is happening, but also how things are affecting our community here as Manitoban to Manitoban, and how people are in many ways struggling with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel everybody's a little bit they're a little bit scared. Everybody's hoping for a positive change, and a lot of people have themselves and their own families at risk. There's also the risk of people's, schooling and jobs and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of mixed feelings. A lot of people want to help and do as much as they can, but at the same time, they're just a little scared of what the repercussions might be for advocating and standing up, which is why we try to advocate as much as we can so that nobody has to feel this way, and they shouldn't feel this way when they're advocating for the truth.
How long have you? What's led you to do advocacy work? Because you've been doing that even before this conflict began.
I just always felt like I needed to be doing something to help out. Every voice matters, and I feel like I kind of have a powerful voice, and I'm kind of out there. So I just wanted to be involved in any way possible that I could be. I think I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years now. So I just wanted to kind of help out and be the voice of change, and hopefully motivate others to join me, and not be scared and kind of break out of their shell. And motivate and use their voice.
Thank you very much for being here today, Mona. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
In studio with us this morning, Mona Zangana. She's a Palestinian student living here in Winnipeg, talking about the significance of today, Nakba Day, but also the fact that there are local events that are going to be happening through today and tomorrow, May 16th.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
It is right now 7:22 a.m. And if you're looking for any of our ongoing coverage on CBC from any of our programs, just remember a reminder to go to our CBC Listen app. Yesterday on the program on Up to Speed, an Israeli student was on the air talking about Israeli Independence Day. That audio on the Listen app. A couple things to update for you here. In traffic this morning, Colleen has called, so lights are back up now on South Pembina, Dalhousie and Killarney. So it should be smooth sailing through there. And Pam also called that down traffic arm on westbound McGilvery just after Pembina is also now clear. Now, we don't have yet information. I'm looking at Corey because he's been updating this. We don't yet know if the power outage across Fort Richmond has been restored. So Hydro so far hasn't put that as an update for us. So we understand that you could still be in the dark in big swaths of Fort Richmond as the power went down last night around 11:30 or so. It's 7:22 a.m. right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you for being with us. Want to mention that tomorrow we're going to be out in community. I always call our remotes our community studios. So we're going to be at Little Sister Coffee Maker at 470 River. And we're going to be talking about the future and current challenges facing Osborne Village. So stay tuned. That is at tomorrow's show live on location. Well, sports coming up, but right now a bit of music from Sarah Smith. This is We Are Loved.
I always thought I'd be part of the 27 Club. You always had your disbelief. Oh, Mom, you tried to save me. Now I'm here to save another soul. I didn't want to pass in vain. Please keep on speaking my name. Wanna be the one on people's minds. Right before they use again, 'cause it could be their last time. We will help each other grow. Let's share By example, you dropped it all, and you never gave up on me. I wanted what you had. I never trusted anyone more. Oh, son, you inspired me. I made a better life for us. Was an addict, now I'm free. Not moving past my grief. I'm just moving through it all. We will help each other grow. Let's share the news, 'cause now we know we are loved, stronger than we know. We can heal from this if we believe in us. We are loved.
Sarah Smith from Pender Island, BC, We Are Loved. It's her tune about encounters with overdoses. She herself is in recovery. The tune's based on a connection she made with Christy Stoulier of Windsor, Ontario, who shared the story of her son's death from a fentanyl overdose.
Through our pain, we'll help some others share our love. Can't break a bond of son and mother, the greatest team.
If you want to find more, by the way, the CBC Listen app has a conversation with Sarah Smith about the tune and the creation of it as well, so you can check that out. It is time for morning sports. Let's switch gears. Here's Scott Regere's with us. Hello.
Hey, Marcy.
Lots of drama last night in the hockey playoffs.
Yeah, including in Boston, Marcy, which won in overtime last night, booking a spot in the Professional Women's Hockey League final. On the wrong end of things, Montreal, which did get a first playoff marker from Marie-Philippe Poulin, but could not hold on to their third period lead. Here is Montreal's coach, Corey Chevry.
I think it's important for our group to know just how well they played over the past 3 games. And it's okay to feel the emotion. It's important to feel the emotion right now. And it's one of those things where I don't know if you do too much different. Out of the, how many periods did we play? 12? I would say we probably outplayed them for 10. Wasn't quite enough.
So it will be Boston versus the winner of the Toronto-Minnesota series in the first ever Walter Cup final. Toronto, with Manitobans Kristen Campbell and Jocelyn Larocque in their lineup, can book their place in the finals with a win tonight. Meantime, in the NHL playoffs, Edmonton with a late, very late winner from Evan Bouchard to beat the Canucks and tie that second round series at 2 games apiece. Winnipeg raised Calvin Pickard. He's 32 years old. His first NHL playoff start. He got the win. He stopped all but 2 pucks the Canucks fired at him last night. The Oak Park High grad was a highly touted prospect back in the day. He's played for 11 different teams all around the world. Finally getting his chance to shine. Good on you, Calvin Pickard.
To the pool now, where there's good news and also disappointing news for Canadian swimmers who are trying to qualify for the Paris Games.
Yeah, and Penny Oleksiak, Marcy, fits that latter description. She was a bronze medal winner at the Tokyo Olympics in the 200-meter freestyle, but Penny didn't meet the qualifying time for Paris in that race last night. In fact, she finished in 9th place and then refused to talk to reporters about it. Penny did say through Swim Canada she's going to focus more on shorter distance races at the Paris Games. Meantime, a breakthrough in the men's 400-meter individual medley.
It's going to be very close. Yankovic is trying so hard. He's just throwing his arms out in front to get that momentum.
Watch the clock. Is he? Yes, going to get it.
Great hearing our Olympic play-by-play duo, Rob Snook and Byron McDonald there. Their excitement over Tristan Yankovic qualifying for Paris. Canada has not had an Olympic competitor in this event, the 400-meter IM, since 2012. And Kelsey Waga, I know a lot of folks following the Winnipeg native and her fortunes trying to get to Paris. She failed to qualify for the 100-meter breaststroke yesterday. Kelsey will now try her luck in the 200-meter breaststroke later this week, and will have continued coverage live streaming the Olympic trials.
And before you go, a time for something completely different.
That sound anathema to some, sweet music to the ears of others, Marcy. A poodle, minus the barking, was front and center in New York last night.
The Best in Show winner at the 148th Annual Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show is the miniature poodle.
Sage, the miniature poodle, coming out big when it mattered most.
Congratulations to Sage, a shiny black poodle from Houston who beat out the best the canine world has to offer last night, claiming the best in show. No small feat when you consider more than 2,500 dogs covering 213 breeds were in contention. Sage and her handler, Kaz Hosaka, are retiring. Osaka says he's just excited about playing in puddles, letting Sage scratch anything she wants, just being a normal dog, out of the spotlight.
And having a less complicated hairdo, because wow. I saw it this morning. Thank you.
Well said.
Take care.
Yeah.
Scott Ricker with Morning Sports. We're going to meet one of the Order of Manitoba recipients. That was just announced over the weekend. We're going to talk to a Winnipeg firefighter who's on that list. He'll be in studio after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It's 7:30. It's cloudy. It's 11. Those showers are going to return today. 5 to 10 millimeters of more rain and a high today of 12. Still on the cool side. We do see some sun and warmer temperatures tomorrow. It was a bird's eye view of northwest Manitoba's wildfire zone.
It's a very dramatic, serious situation.
Premier Wab Kinew getting a helicopter tour yesterday of a massive blaze burning near Flin Flon. He also met with some of the 550 people forced out of Cranberry Portage. Many are staying temporarily in hotels in the Paw. Some are staying in Flin Flon. Kinew says his government will ensure those evacuees are supported.
We're going to be there to ensure that response is coordinated, properly resourced. And then, of course, people are wondering about a potentially longer stay away from home. We're going to ensure that the provisions for food and shelter are in place there.
And Kinew says depending how long it takes to get people back home, some may need to relocate to other places like Dauphin, Brandon, or Winnipeg. He says the province will also support evacuees when they're allowed to return home. Meanwhile, a chance of showers, just a chance, is forecast today for that area. Now, Joanne Head is one of the evacuees who spoke with the Premier in the Paw yesterday. She's frustrated with how the evacuation's been managed. Head says it's been more difficult for seniors and those with health conditions whose concerns, she says, have been ignored.
I'm thankful that everybody in our community made it out safe and sound. But for us to be ignored the way and held for so long waiting for help, it was very hard on a lot of us.
Head says there should have been a more organized response to a wildfire like this since conditions in the area have been dry and that area has always been at risk of fires. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the owners of Food Fair want to talk to media later this morning after a police incident last night. In a release, the AMC says it wants to address a recent incident of violence at the grocery store on Portage Avenue. It says a number of staff members were taken to hospital. Police cars were outside that store last evening. Earlier this month, the AMC cut ties with the independent grocery chain after a store supervisor allegedly punched a woman accused of shoplifting. In the most recent release, AMC says it is working closely with the owners of Food Fair who have apologized for that incident. Food Fair owners have agreed to cultural sensitivity training for staff. Now to the latest in the trial of a serial killer. But first, CBC has learned through the court proceedings, Jeremy Skibitsky pronounces his name as Skibitsky, and we will now reflect that. Today, 3 people who lived in the same apartment building where Skibitsky killed 4 women are expected to testify. Skibitsky told police he strangled or drowned the women in his home and then disposed of their bodies in garbage bins. He's pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. His lawyers say he killed the 4 women but is not criminally responsible due to a mental illness. Crown prosecutors say the killings were racially motivated and Skibitsky preyed on the vulnerable women at homeless shelters. A worker from one of those homeless shelters is also expected to speak later today during the trial. Some summer camps in Manitoba are scrambling after expected provincial funding fizzled. Every year, the province distributes grants through its Green Team program. Well, this year, some camps received less money and some didn't receive any at all. One of the camps that was denied funding was Camp Masad in Sandy Hook. Executive Director Daniel Sprints says they're already facing financial pressures left over from the COVID-19 pandemic.
We were closed for 2 years straight. And for them to do this right now to us is sort of like a thumb in the face, like they don't know what we do. We're really hoping that the Manitoba government is going to reconsider.
Sprint says this is the first time Camp Masat has been denied funding. Ian Bushy, Minister for the Green Team program, says they received a record number of applications this year and there just wasn't enough money to go around. Most Winnipeggers learned this week how much money they owe in property taxes. The city says notices are in the mail. Some property owners may notice their bill for school taxes isn't as high as last year. That's because the province is giving people their 50% rebate right on the bill instead of a check in the mail like the former PC government's rebate. Leo DeBrook offers tax services by house call. He says most people don't understand either the NDP or the PC version.
It's very confusing because the government gives it to you and then they give you a credit back. They're like, well, why do we have to pay it in the first place?
You can learn more about all of this on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken ended a surprise trip to Ukraine with some Canadian rock and roll at a bar in Kyiv. That's Blinken playing guitar, singing vocals to the Neil Young classic, Rockin' in the Free World. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on in the regional forecast on CBC. Abby is here to talk about the rain, where it is and when it's coming.
Yeah, it's still on its way. We're expecting that to hit us close to the launch hour period, but right now it's cloudy in the city. We are at 11 degrees and we should be seeing about 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall later today, and we'll hit a high of 12. That shower is going to be tapering off later tonight, leaving us with fog patches, and then we'll get to a low of 8 degrees. As we head west to Brandon, where it's 8 degrees and cloudy, today we'll see a 30% chance of showers with highs around 15. Moving north to Thompson, where it's 7 degrees and mostly cloudy. For folks up there, you should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 19. Further north in Churchill, it is 1 and mostly cloudy. Today will be cloudy, and then we'll get a mix of sun and clouds in the afternoon, and the high for today will be around 9. Down in Dauphin, it is 8 degrees and cloudy with some fog patches clearing up. We have a 30% chance of showers this morning, and then a transition to a mix of sun and clouds. For the highs, you'd see around 18. In Gimli, it is 8 degrees and cloudy. Showers will be ending in the afternoon once that's that, and then leaving us with cloudy skies. And for the highs, we'll get to 11. Steinbach is currently at 10 degrees and cloudy. Expect showers this morning with 10 to 15 millimeters of rainfall, and for the highs, you'd hit 15. Finally, in Morris, it is 11 degrees and cloudy. Today, we'll see showers beginning sometime this morning. We'll be seeing about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain and a high of 15. In summary, for Winnipeg, showers this morning, a transition into mainly cloudy skies. Will hit a high of 12. It's going to be tapering off later tonight, and then some fog patches would develop overnight, and tomorrow will bring more of like a mix of sun and clouds with possibilities of showers and thunderstorms somewhere in between. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 11, heading to a high of 12.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the commute now. Corey.
I have exclusively good traffic news today. That power is back in Fort Richmond area. So I was talking earlier how that originally had the lights out at Pembina and Dalhousie, Pembina and Killarney, but that is actually now restored. Got a couple of calls. The lights are good. Traffic is running smooth. Hydro's website says that outage is no longer in effect in the Fort Richmond area. So power should be restored there as well. Also, just a reminder earlier, I know I got calls on McGillivray. There was a traffic arm that was down that blocks the people from crossing the train tracks there. It got knocked over. But that's also clear as well on westbound McGillivray just after you turn off on from Pembina. So good to go. But if you hear something else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, and I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, just a quick reminder as well, that special air quality statement does continue, not for Winnipeg, but still for up north, around where the fire's burning outside Cranberry Portage. So the Paw, Wanless, West Ray, Cranberry, as well as Snow Lake, Leaf and Puck, Lynn Lake, all affected by air quality. Well, speaking of firefighters, a Winnipeg firefighter who's been a champion in his community is among 12 receiving the Order of Manitoba this year. The list is always a secret until Manitoba Day, and then it's announced, so it was over the weekend. The Order of Manitoba was established back in 1999. It honors Manitobans who have demonstrated excellence and achievement in their field. Manitobans like Chad Swayze, who is entering his 24th year as a firefighter. He played a big role in Winnipeg successfully hosting the 2023 World Police and Fire Games. As a member of the LGBTQ community, he's represented Canada in the Games 9 times. He's won multiple medals, and he's been really open in his fight for better mental health as well for firefighters. And he's here. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you feeling about receiving the Order of Manitoba?
It's a fantastic feeling, yeah. The Lieutenant Governor called me a couple weeks ago and let me know the great news. I was just shocked when I got that phone call.
Yeah. So with did you see it come up? Did it say LG on your phone display?
It just had a regular number, and then when I found out who it was, I was just, again, in shock.
Yeah. You knew you were nominated, obviously. It's a big process to be nominated with a lot of documentation. What does it mean to you as somebody that has worked in your field in the way I described for so many years in our province?
It's pretty special. I didn't go into what I did thinking that this would be a nomination and an actual receiving this award, but it's a special recognition of all the hard work done.
What did you go into firefighting for back in the day? What made you want to be a firefighter?
Years before, a family member had seizures, and I didn't know what to do. So I wanted to do the best I could, taking a first aid course, and then it just kind of progressed into to becoming a paramedic and firefighter in Brandon, and then moving on to Winnipeg.
Who was having seizures?
My sister.
Yeah. How old was she?
She was probably about 16, 17, and I was quite young. I was 12 or so, and not knowing then what or how to help with that, that's why I took my first aid course.
What does it feel like to be able to save someone, to help someone?
It's pretty special. You can't help everyone, and especially in seizures, you're more just helping them to recover from what's going on in their body.
But even in your life, in a wider way, you've given your life to the service of helping others.
It's good to meet up with people that you've actually helped along the way. We did CPR on a firefighter, and for over an hour, and luckily he recovered, and he's back at work. And I was actually able to sit at a Bomber game with him and watch the Bomber game with him. So that was a special moment.
How incredible. How incredible. The thing is, of course, the other side of this is that this is very challenging on firefighters' mental health. We just this month have been doing stories about, trying to get better mental health awareness and supports. I know that you yourself have struggled with that in the past. Can you tell us a bit about that? What you struggled with?
I was involved in a workplace accident where we were blown out of a building back in 2012, and I struggled with the what ifs. What if we were a little bit further into the building or whatnot. So my mental capabilities really took a deep dive there, and I struggled with going back to work for a while, just because not knowing maybe the next day would be my last.
Were you formally then diagnosed with PTSD and treated for that then, Chad?
Yes, I went through a couple of psychologists and eventually diagnosed with PTSD. That was back when we really didn't have legislation for presumptive legislation for mental illness. When a firefighter has a broken bone, they can see, oh, it's broken, you're not going to work. But when you have a broken mind, it's hard to diagnose that and to get recognition for that. So I helped the fire union go in front of the MLAs and talk about the importance of being covered under the presumptive legislation.
I know you did that. What was it like for you to do that? Anyone who steps forward as a first in this province to fight for others, it can be nerve-wracking. You're out there with your personal story as well. So tell me a bit about what that was like in when you sort of looked at yourself in the mirror and said, no, I'm going to do this. This is important.
That was probably one of the hardest times in my life because I was struggling and going through my treatment for PTSD, but also having to talk to people that I didn't really know, MLAs and whatnot, about my very personal story. And back then, there's a lot more stigma against, you don't talk about your feelings in the fire hall. Now it's more open. People are more adapted to talking to other firefighters, talking to friends and family about what's going on with them mentally because of stuff that's going on in the fires and medical calls.
To the fun side of what you've done with your career, what's your sport in the fire games? Like what's the thing that you keep going back for, that you're medaling in, that you love?
Well, 2007, because of a poster in the fire hall, we went down as a team for dragon boat racing. But I also did archery. So I've done archery since I've been about 11 years old, and I've shot archery in these games for the last nine games.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm wondering what you're thinking right now when you're watching the forest fires up north and we're hearing firefighters coming from other provinces and coming together, and what you understand about sort of what that's like, that need to respond to an emergency that could be we're told this could be burning for weeks. What's it like to be doing something like that, where you also require it's emergency, but also you're in for a long haul?
It's a bit different firefighting than what I do. I do structural firefighting versus forest fire. I know that the same dangers are there for them, and they're putting their lives on hold. They're leaving their families for the summer, for summer fire season. So I give them a tip in my hat for what they're doing. It's long days, hard days, cutting fire lines and whatnot. So just hopefully that they're being safe there, and we get the fires under control quickly.
Of course, you're here this morning because of the Order of Manitoba. So I wonder if you have advice that you wish you could have told yourself when you started in firefighting.
Just keep at it and keep doing the best you can. It's a weird thing. Like I said, I didn't enter this to becoming an Order of Manitoba recipient, but just do your best and knowing that you can possibly save someone's life. It's an amazing feeling.
How did your friends and family react? We started by talking about that call from the LG. You have to keep it quiet then. You're only allowed to maybe tell like one or two people or something. But then Sunday, the press release, the announcement comes out and everybody knows. How did everybody react?
It was inpouring of support and congratulations. Like I said, when I spoke to the LG back a few weeks ago, it was like, keep it quiet, telling your nearest and dearest. So the first person I told was my mom, and she was just in shock. And to her credit, she kept that secret pretty tight to her chest, but when I woke up on Sunday and heard that it was announced on Sunday, which we kind of knew it was going to, the inpouring of support and love and congratulations was amazing.
Enjoy it when you receive it this year. It really is an honor, and congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
That's Chad Swayze talking about his life and his career because he is one of the 12 recipients of the Order of Manitoba this year. He's an acting lieutenant in the Winnipeg Fire Department.
Suddenly, my face shows she knows my mind rolls out, no doubt. My thoughts tumble south and stroll on down to my mouth. Tongue stumbles, lips fumble, words crumble, thoughts be jumbled. We piece the puzzle, my red cheeks struggle, intent expressed with an antonym for subtle. Let's hear what she has to say. I had this feeling earlier too, but you let moment happen when the happening's cool. Don't you ever go changing, my friend. Tomorrow we'll have as much fun again. When I look back on the day, I'll say, hey, pretty wonderful, wouldn't you say? I wouldn't have had it any other way. Store and save the moods we crave. Tuck them away until June. Don't let that June escape. So save the moods we crave. Tuck them away and let's snooze these blues away, yeah. Until June. Store and save the moods we crave before we all get stuck. The sky will rain for days while the moon ticks and talks.
The Prairie Joggers, Winnipeg folk rock group. The tune's called Moments Happen. And in this moment, it is 10 to 8. It's 11 degrees in the city, mostly cloudy. We are expecting about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain today. And in northern Manitoba, northwestern Manitoba, around Cranberry Portage, there's just a chance of showers. So unfortunately, I wish I could tell you there was a huge douse of rain coming for there, but that is not the case. And the special air quality advisory continues for that area. So let's get an update on what is happening. The fire started and has quickly spread through the area since last Thursday. Over the weekend, of course, hundreds of people out of their homes, and they remain out of Cranberry Portage. And other communities around that area are still on alert. So let's get an update from Earl Simmons, who's with us live on CBC. He's Director of Manitoba Wildfire Services. Good morning.
Good morning.
How close to Cranberry Portage now is the fire, and what are you watching for with the wind?
The fire is still a kilometer and a half from the community. Crews have gotten in there and put up valley protection. And what that is sprinklers on top of buildings. And if we can get those running 2 hours before a fire gets into an area, it gives us a chance to protect those structures. But I'm feeling good about the work the fire crews are doing. And in fact, hopefully by the weekend, we can perhaps get the folks back into Cranberry Portage. We were fortunate enough that yesterday the Manitoba Hydro crews worked hard and restored power to Cranberry Portage, and Bell MTS also restored all of their services throughout the area, including up to Flin Flon. So it was a good day yesterday.
How will you make that decision? Will how far the fire is from community determine that, or will sort of just a change in the weather determine whether people are allowed back home?
It'll be when we have the ability to secure that line to extinguish it, so it's not going to come into the community anymore. So we feel comfortable that there's no way that fire can come into the community. So that'll be the ground crews making those efforts to put the fire out. And the challenging thing with this is because the conditions are so extremely dry up there, the fires burn down deep. So the firefighters have to get in there and dig really deep into the ground to put it out. And we're not just talking, a few inches. We're talking meters into the ground in spots.
Is it the same size? We keep saying around 31,000 hectares.
Yeah, it's 31,600. It has grown. We're going to get an up-to-date map today. There was a few excursions where the fire had jumped the fire line there, and the water bombers got on it, and so it's a little bit bigger. But none of the areas of concern were affected by that. I suspect the size would be less than 33,000 hectares still. But the fire hasn't really grown.
Has anything been lost structurally in Cranberry Portage?
Nothing has been lost in Cranberry Portage. There was the fire did go into the dump and cause some damage in the dump, but otherwise there was no damage in the Cranberry Portage area. And our crews from Ontario have arrived to assist us, and later in the week, we've got 40 crews coming from Quebec and New Brunswick to also augment our efforts there. Committed 6 water bombers to help secure lines, so then we can put crews in afterwards. Once the line is cooled down, they go in and put out the fire. And 7 helicopters are right at Baker's Narrows there to support the firefighting efforts.
When you say 40 crews, just for my own education, is that 40 people or 40 crews coming?
Sorry, no. If I said that, there's another 40 personnel coming, 20 from Quebec and 20 from New Brunswick.
How welcome is that help? I suspect firefighters must be exhausted.
It's really welcome, and because of the sheer size of this fire, we want to protect the community. That fire runs between Cranberry Portage and Flin Flon, so there is a lot of area there. I don't want people to get a false sense of security. This is still a huge fire that's, potentially threatening Cranberry Portage and Flin Flon and the surrounding areas. We're going to require a lot of work, and we were fortunate to have the Honorable Log Canoe Premier Manitoba show him the area and show him the extent of the damage up there yesterday by one of the incident management teams.
Yeah, we were hearing some of that this morning from the Premier and his visit and flyover. How critical is it now and important that you have communication services restored, as you said?
We set up some of our own communication, so we're fine. But it's important so then we have another means of contacting folks and they can stay in the know. But it's appreciated when folks like yourself from the CBC and the local radio station CFAR up there, get out the word on what's going on and keep people up to date on the situation. And, we really appreciate the support and patience of the people that got evacuated, especially it was on short notice. This fire acted uncharacteristically. It took off, and we were quite concerned about the community, and those folks were really great in getting out there, and must have been really, really scary for them, and we appreciate the support from those folks, and we're working hard to get them back into their community.
This was started by a lightning strike. We continue to talk about those dry conditions, and of course, as you said, this acted uncharacteristically. We're also somewhat early in the season. How does the rest of the province look right now? Like, what are your concerns moving forward for wildfire season in Manitoba, and then how prepared we are?
Probably the most concerning area is still that western area there, the northwest where this fire started. It wasn't surprised that we would get a fire in that area given the dry conditions, and then the dry lightning come through with no rain. So that area is still an area of concern, and we're planning accordingly by moving crews and helicopters and water bombers, and then as I spoke earlier, bringing extra crews in to augment our efforts across the province and be prepared. We try to catch fires when they're smaller. It's a lot easier to put them out. Unfortunately, with this fire, it grew really fast. It was wind-driven and high temperatures and drought conditions. There was no way that we could stop this fire.
Have you learned anything from this, though, Earl? Like when you think, okay, so we're dealing with this still, but moving forward for wildfire season in Manitoba, here's what we need so we can respond faster or alert in a different way. Like, is there anything that can be done? Obviously, Mother Nature, you can't change the lightning, but what are your hopes moving forward? What have you learned?
I think we always learn lessons on fires, and the big thing is that the climate is definitely changing, and our fire seasons are growing longer, and the fires are growing more intense. So we're going to have to build up our arsenal of resources to be able to deal with these situations, and build up the wildfire service so that we can be able to respond to these type of events.
How do you do that? Is that recruitment within Manitoba? Are you talking about?
It would be increasing our number of crews that we have, building up bases and resources to have them available in key locations to continue to build up on that, so that we have more folks readily available to deal with when these fires break out.
And just real quick, is there an active is there activity right now that's trying to achieve that in our province?
Well, of course, we're working with senior management of our department and the minister to build on our wildfire service. Yes, we are, and then it was good that the premier was there to see how the destruction and how fast it can occur.
And what the need is. Thank you very much, Earl. Really, really appreciate your time today live. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate and if people have any questions that were affected by the evacuation, please call 211. So thank you so much.
Earl Simmons, Director of Manitoba Wildfire Services. Heather?
Yes, good morning. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the owners of Food Fair are holding a news conference this morning after a police incident last night. In a release, the AMC says it wants to address a recent incident of violence at that Portage Avenue grocery store. And some summer camps in Manitoba are scrambling after expected provincial funding fizzled. The province says there's only so much money to go around. We'll hear more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Power restored in Fort Richmond. Rain coming for Winnipeg, 11 degrees now, and we'll talk to a structural engineer after 8 about the situation at Birchwood Terrace where residents were evacuated last week.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Kathleen Hanna, the legendary feminist punk rock icon, will tell you there's no HR department in punk rock. She'll be here to tell you about her new book and having to revisit sexism she and her bands faced on the road and what made writing it down worth it. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current. with Matt Galloway.
Alberta is running low on water with a low snowpack and drying riverbeds, and that is leaving farmers turning to water trading in what is becoming a competitive market. The fight for water in Alberta and who should get priority coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In Alberta, the wildfire threatening Fort McMurray is now more than 20,000 hectares in size, and it is still out of control. More than 6,000 people have left their homes. The CBC's Julia Wong has been speaking to some of them. They say this evacuation is bringing up traumatic memories from 8 years ago.
Bank files and insurance stuff, passports.
Alex Mortlock points to the stuff he grabbed from his Fort McMurray house after being told he had mere hours to leave. He's now staying at an RV park in Athabasca, about 300 kilometers southwest of Fort McMurray. His house is in one of 4 neighborhoods under an evacuation order. Mortlock fled the massive 2016 wildfire, losing his home, but says that experience did not make this one any easier.
Not really. Nothing can prepare you, I don't think. Still the same anxiety, same things going through your mind, and this time I have kids to worry about.
Fort McMurray Fire Chief Jody Butts says evacuating some neighborhoods will make it easier on crews.
If we can get the residents out of harm's way and we can get our structural protection resources in place and going to work.
Butts says crews are more prepared than 8 years ago, when the fire dubbed the Beast forced out the entire city, ultimately destroying 2,400 houses and businesses. This fire is different from the 2016 fire, though. It's burning not in the trees, but on the ground, says Butts.
This fire, as we're looking out the window here today, it's in the old burn in 2016. So all the dead and down trees that were there, that's what's being burnt right now, along with some dry grass.
As for Mortlock, he's processing his latest evacuation and trying to stay calm.
A little panicked. Don't know if I'm going to have a home or if it's going to spread.
Local and provincial officials will hold an update later today. Julia Wong, CBC News, Athabasca, Alberta.
Fire officials in British Columbia say conditions around Fort Nelson are favorable. Ben Bogeen is a fire behavior specialist. He says the fire closest to Fort Nelson is 2 kilometers away.
Reduced winds have resulted in favorable firefighting conditions, a reduction in fire behavior, and minimal fire growth towards the community.
But there is a second wildfire burning about 25 kilometers north of Fort Nelson, and it has been growing aggressively. Bogeen says it does not pose a threat to the community for now. Further east in Manitoba, Premier Wab Kinew is promising support for hundreds of people who escaped wildfires in his province. He flew over the area where a fire is threatening the community of Cranberry Portage.
When you see firsthand how close it got to Cranberry, it really tells you how serious the situation is. The thing that stands out for me is how early in the year we are.
Crews from Ontario have joined firefighting efforts in Manitoba, and the fire threatening Cranberry Portage has not grown in 2 days, but it is within 2 kilometers of the town site. Today in Winnipeg, a court is expected to hear from 3 people who lived in the same apartment building as Jeremy Skibitsky. Skibitsky told police he killed 4 women in his home and disposed of their bodies in garbage bins. Skibitsky is charged with the first-degree murder of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, and Mercedes Myron, and an unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. His lawyers say he has a mental illness and should be considered not criminally responsible. To Ukraine now, where President Volodymyr Zelensky is canceling all foreign travel. This is as Russia takes more territory in Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region. Moscow claims to have seized 2 more villages in the Kharkiv region following an incursion there last week. Journalist Julia Chapman has the details.
President Zelensky had been due to visit Spain and Portugal later this week, but that trip was called off. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian leader said international events would be postponed. He gave no reason for the decision, but it comes as events on the battlefield are ramping up. Russian forces have been pushing forward in recent days, opening a new front in the northeastern Kharkiv region. This police officer says enemy troops are inside the town of Vovchansk as fighting is heard in the background. In his nightly address, President Zelensky described the situation as tense but under control. Instead of meeting foreign officials abroad, he's receiving visitors in Kyiv. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken continued his trip on Wednesday. He announced further funding to help boost Ukraine's defense production and procurement.
We will provide an additional $2 billion in foreign military financing for Ukraine. And we put this together in a first-of-its-kind defense enterprise fund.
Blinken said that America is determined that Ukraine wins the war. Julia Chapman for CBC News, London.
Palestinians across the Middle East are marking the anniversary of their mass expulsion from what is now Israel. In Ramallah, they are rallying to mark the Nakba, that is Arabic for catastrophe, and it refers to 1948 when Israel was created, and 700,000 Palestinians fled or were driven out of the region. Our correspondent Chris Brown is there. And Chris, what is the mood in Ramallah this morning?
Well, I've just stepped aside from a really somber almost event. This is Nakba Day in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. It was 76 years ago that the State of Israel was created, and this day is really almost a counter event to Israeli Independence Day, which was yesterday. So on the street, you're seeing all kinds of signs of Palestinian resistance. Lots of Palestinian flags, lots of people wearing the black and white keffiyehs around their necks and over their heads. And they're also carrying lots of signs saying things such as Palestine will be free. And as I say, this is not a celebration. It really is more like a memorial.
What are people there saying about the war in Gaza?
For many people here, I think there's a real echo back to those events of 1948. What they see in Gaza is more Palestinian mass displacement. They also see more Palestinian communities fighting for their existence. So these events are really resonate here on the West Bank. They have family members there who've been killed. And so there's also not much hope that this is going to end anytime soon. Talking to people on the street, they really don't see many good prospects for a ceasefire.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
CBC's Chris Brown reporting from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. French President Emmanuel Macron will ask his cabinet to declare a state of emergency in the South Pacific archipelago of New Caledonia. It comes after at least 2 people were killed and hundreds more injured during rioting there. Fireworks and smoke blanket the night. Schools remain closed and a curfew is being enforced in the capital. Paris adopted changes to the overseas French territories' voting rules. It allows recent arrivals to vote in provincial elections. Some local leaders fear that will marginalize the vote of the indigenous Kanak people. It is just the latest in the decades-long tension over France's role on the island. And finally, Russia's president is making his first trip overseas since starting his new 6-year term. Vladimir Putin is heading to Beijing. The visit showcases Moscow's reliance on China for support. Journalist Yana Lee reports.
On the streets of China's capital, Russia's president has plenty of admirers. He's a very capable person. Another said people in China think he's formidable. Vladimir Putin's face-to-face with Xi Jinping is his 4th since the two declared a no-limits partnership between Moscow and Beijing just before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Xi hasn't openly declared support for the war, but he defended China's close relationship with the Kremlin during his recent tour of Europe. The two countries have also expanded economic ties. It's helped Moscow weather unprecedented sanctions imposed by the West, but that's coming under pressure. Chinese customs data showed exports to Russia dipped in March and April, following warnings from Washington that Chinese banks aiding the war in Ukraine could face secondary sanctions. Several lenders have slowed transactions. Some have halted business altogether.
So Russia really needs from
Frank Piker is an expert on China at the National University of Singapore and says Putin wants to address trade volumes with Beijing.
That includes strategic goods that it needs for the war machine, but it also includes food, products, consumer durables, and so on and so forth.
But under growing international scrutiny, the limits of their partnership could be put to test. particularly as China wants to avoid any negative impact on its own struggling economy. Yana Li for CBC News, Beijing.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm RC Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Thanks for being with us. Rain expected today in cloudy Winnipeg. This hour on the show, what went wrong structurally in the building, Birchwood Terrace Apartments, where last week tenants were forced to evacuate with very little notice.
Emotionally, it's like I'm living a nightmare. It's surreal. I feel like this shouldn't be happening in today's society with our technology. They should have known way in advance, and they should have protected us as their residents.
We're going to have a conversation with a structural engineer about buildings overall and what we understand about garages beneath structures similar to ones like Birchwood Terrace. So stay tuned for that discussion. Also, a guide is coming out today for student belonging in public schools in Manitoba. It's been created by superintendents. We're going to hear more about what is in it, and what led to the creation of this guide was the high rate of absenteeism in some school divisions in this province. And we heard from the Winnipeg School Division, a superintendent, who said that part of that is because some students feel they don't belong in schools. So how will this guide actually effectively change things? We'll have that discussion as well with the super of Louis Riel, who will join us live. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who joins us with other news stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's Premier got a bird's eye look yesterday at the wildfire zone in a helicopter tour. Wab Canoe met with some people who had been forced out of Cranberry Portage on the weekend, 550 in all. One of them is Joanne Head. She got to meet with the Premier in the Paw. She's frustrated with how the evacuation was managed and says it's been more difficult for seniors and those with health conditions whose concerns, she says, have been ignored. So we'll hear more coming up. And the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the owners of Food Fair want to talk to media later this morning after a police incident last night. In a release, the AMC says it wants to address a recent incident of violence at the Portage Avenue grocery store. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into this forecast. Abby, same kind of gray sky we started with 3 hours ago.
Yeah, still gray sky. The mercury hasn't moved much from 11 degrees. Cloudy outside. We're starting off with cloudy conditions. The rain will definitely, the showers will be coming later. We're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters. That's what's expected, and we're heading for a high of 12 today. Tonight, the showers would end, leaving us with cloudy skies. We're going to see some fog patches developing overnight, and then we're going to deep down to a low of 8 degrees. And tomorrow, we're going to have a mix of sun and clouds in the morning, and possible showers and thunderstorm later tomorrow afternoon. But for today, we're at 11, heading to a high of 12.
Wish you could send all this up north. In Cranberry Portage, there's just a slight chance of showers, unfortunately. There is a special air quality statement, by the way, that's still issued for that part of Manitoba. Let's get into traffic and the commute with Corey.
Well, that highway still remains closed, Highway 10, from Baker's Narrows, that's just south of Flin Flon, of course, until the intersection with Highway 39 because of that wildfire. That really is the only issue out there on the highways right now. Here in the city, things are also running fairly smoothly. If you see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, you just heard from one of the residents of Birchwood Terrace Apartments on Portage Avenue. Some 250 people, as mentioned, displaced last week very quickly after being forced from their suites. Residents say they were told by the city last Thursday night they had to pack up what they could and leave immediately for safety reasons. The city's order to vacate said that a third-party engineering inspection found, quote, serious structural deterioration in columns of the building's parkade. You can see photos in our website story at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, Chris Rowney is with us via Zoom this morning, a structural engineer based in Kingston, Ontario. He's also seen these photos, and he's here to talk a little bit about these types of structural issues. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. It's nice to join you.
So what kind of work, just so we can have some context, would you do as a day-to-day as a structural engineer, Chris?
Well, day to day, I'm a practicing structural engineer. I have been for over 30 years now. My job is to design the structural part that goes into a building. You can imagine a building, and when people think of buildings, they think of the walls and the rooms and the appearance of the building. But much of that is the part that is the responsibility of the architect. Just like in a human body analogy, the skin, the hair color, the eyes, that sort of thing, the parts that you see. The parts that I'm responsible for as a structural engineer are what's on the inside, the things that often are concealed behind finishes and ceilings and drywall. And that's the skeleton and the muscles of the building, the columns, the floor slabs, that sort of thing. And that's what I'm responsible for as a structural engineer, both designing and also as my role of a structural engineer. Quite often, it's a matter of assessing existing buildings that have been around for a while, including understanding how those buildings might deteriorate and their strength might be adversely affected over time. And also sometimes, sadly, getting into incidents where I'm doing forensic investigations into a collapse and understanding why it happened and what lessons we can learn from that.
So I know that you've seen some photos of the structural damage in Birchwood Terrace's parking garage, which is beneath the building where the residents were evacuated, of course. So you don't have, of course, knowledge of the history of the building. You're not here. This is not a professional opinion on why this happened. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder what your impressions of that were, and if you could sort of also outline the kind of weight that those columns would take from the building above, and what you would inspect if you're looking for damage that is critical, that might cause something so abrupt like what we saw with this, this evacuation.
Well, first of all, thank you for the disclaimer. I am seeing these photographs from the outside, and I don't intimately know the building. I don't intimately understand the extent of its framing, and I don't necessarily know exactly what loads those columns in question are taking. What I see from the photographs, what I've seen from the same media reports that everybody else who's been paying, listening and to this story has seen, is that apparently there are one or more columns that are in the parkade portion of this multi-story residential building, where indications of corrosion, in some cases apparently quite serious, has been found. These columns being in the parkade, I'm assuming that it's beneath the building. Quite often, that's where all the underground parking is, and the building structure is above it. So these columns are taking the weight of all the floors and structure above quite often, and so there's considerable stress on them. They're in a parking garage environment. I understand these are steel columns, so it's a steel frame structure, and in many ways, that's actually good news. When it comes to what the prognosis on the future of the building is. But these steel columns, steel's susceptible to or vulnerable to fire. And so they're typically, the structure is protected by fireproofing. When I saw the initial reports, they talked about initially, there was some indication that there was some damage to what was the plaster or drywall that conceals the columns, because you can't actually see the structural elements. Just like that human body analogy that I gave you, it's beneath the skin is where these structural elements are. And so that is, my understanding, what initially triggered some further investigation, because it looked like initially maybe the column had been struck by a car or something, because the plaster was exhibiting signs of cracking and displacement. And it's only after that plaster was removed to assess the structure behind that the first indications that there was actually some serious structural deterioration taking place.
What does that look like? Not at Birchwood, but in your experience, when you have serious structural deterioration on a steel column like that, is it a crack? Like, what would be serious to you?
Well, and again, typically we have a steel column, and the principal mechanism of deterioration that is at play here is corrosion. Corrosion occurs often on steel. You leave your bike out in the rain and that chain is going to start rusting up on you. And some corrosion is normal. It's just a fact of life that you're going to have that anytime that you have steel with any sorts of exposure to oxygen and moisture. That happens. And it's not necessarily serious until it progresses to the point where you're starting to, that iron oxide, that's what rust is. It's a chemical reaction that's changing the nature of the steel, and that's what starts flaking off, and it's reducing what's left of the important steel that is taking the load. And so some corrosion is normal. It's common, and you'll find it in building structures on a regular basis. And that's part of building maintenance, is that you have to identify it and fix it before it becomes a serious problem.
Now, the bike, obviously, if it starts to rust, isn't going to fall to pieces beneath us very quickly. People can follow that analogy. Is there a way to assess how long it can take for deterioration to become an urgent situation where an evacuation like this would be necessary?
Mm-hmm. Well, that really does come down to how much cross-sectional area of the steel has been lost when it's discovered. The challenge
on
that
one
structural
column, or if I may interject, on one column or on all of them?
Well, the loss of even one column can result in a serious and potential progressive collapse of an entire structure or a significant portion thereof. And any kind of partial collapse even is definitely a threat to life safety and has to be taken very seriously. Now, that being said, I mentioned that deterioration of steel and corrosion, and not only steel. I mean, we shouldn't pick on just structural steel. There's also reinforced concrete buildings, and most parking structures are actually reinforced concrete, but they suffer the same sorts of potential maintenance problems. What makes parking garages and parkades, even ones that are underground and not exposed necessarily to snow, what makes them particularly vulnerable is the fact that cars are carrying in moisture from snow and rain, and also during the wintertime, they're typically carrying in de-icing chemicals, chlorides. Chlorides are a catalyst that will attack steel, both steel embedded in concrete as well as exposed structural steel, such as we have here, and accelerate the corrosion dramatically. And that's why under today's codes and standards that govern the design and construction of parking structures or parts of buildings that have areas exposed to parking, there are much more strict CSA standards in effect today than what were likely in place at the time that this building was constructed because of this very problem. And the problem that just gets that much worse in that the structure is hidden behind fireproofing and finishes. So you can't necessarily readily see that you have a problem beginning until it starts to get a little bit more serious.
Chris Roney, really appreciate your time on this morning. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Chris Rowney, is a structural engineer based in Kingston, Ontario, and has been with us this morning to comment on the situation at Birchwood Terrace here in Winnipeg.
Danse, Anine, Boujou, and hello. It's me, your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Guess what? Unreserved is turning 10. That's like 100 in Res Dog years. And to celebrate, we're inviting you to a live taping of Unreserved, May 22nd at the Park Theatre in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. Sherry McKay, Doozy, and Unreserved's Auntie Circle will all be there. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and click on the link to register.
8:23 a.m. the time right now, 11 in Winnipeg. As Abby said, we're kind of stuck there. Mainly cloudy, and we've got rain coming. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC. Well, just out today is something called a Guide for Student Belonging in Public Schools in Manitoba, and it was put together by the Manitoba Association of School Superintendents. And part of that was a response to stories that we've been covering here on CBC. You might remember that in February, several high schools in the Winnipeg School Division implemented either a late start or early dismissal one day every week, trying to give staff more time to determine which students have been missing school. So making phone calls, organizing home visits if that's what's needed. The superintendent at that time of the Winnipeg Division talked about a lack of belonging for some students who were missing school. So this guide is an effort to respond to that and more. And we have on the line with us this morning to talk about it Kristen Michalik, who's a superintendent in the Louis Riel School Division, but also co-president of the Manitoba Association of School Superintendents that put this together. Good morning.
Good morning.
So can you tell me more about the need for this and why you see this document as something that you hope will help schools?
Well, in your opening remarks, you touched on how belonging is an essential human need and is at the heart of students flourishing in school, and it is essential that we are always in dialogue about how we ensure schools are welcoming, safe places for everyone. So the guide aims to promote and support that ongoing dialogue to ensure that every child in our public schools in Manitoba feels a sense of belonging, safety, respect, and how we sometimes lose our way when we don't ground that understanding in strong guiding principles, legal frameworks. So it offers lots for a fruitful dialogue, inner dialogue, and a dialogue with the communities we serve.
A lot of this does outline, as you said, sort of the expectation. So there's international context here. There's United Nations Convention. There's also upholding the promises made in Truth and Reconciliation. But there's also a whole section in this guide for schools that talks about what hinders a sense of belonging. And one of the things it says here is not being proficient in the language of instruction. I wonder how you make a guide like this practical to improve those things in schools in Manitoba.
Right. Well, you've just touched on the idea that how we nurture that sense of belonging, of course, is through communication, language, and so when we think of our multilingual learners in our schools, we always have to be, as a community of educators, in conversation about our practice and how we find ways of building on the languages children come to us with, and we live in this time where we have technologies available to us that make that aspiration for our practice achievable in ways it wasn't when I started teaching. So it's exciting in that way.
Can you tell me where schools and educators can access the new guide that's out today?
It's on our website. We're a tiny little organization. We're just a little over 100 members strong. It's a member-led organization. So we have a website, and you'll find this guide and many other papers we've written over the years to support public education in Manitoba.
Thank you very much for being with us, Christian, and for drawing our attention to the fact that this is out just today. Appreciate having you on the program.
Okay, thanks so much for your interest. Have a great day.
You as well. That's Christian Michalik, Superintendent of the Louis Riel School Division, co-president of the Manitoba Association of School Superintendents. And that is the group that put together this new guide that's out today for student belonging in public schools in the province. You can go to the Mass website for more information, as he mentioned. It is 8:27 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 9:90 a.m. on the app or YouTube. I want to mention tomorrow we're not in studio. We are out in community studio, as I like to call it. So we're on location. We're at Little Sister Coffee Maker in the village, Osborne Village, 470 River. Please come and hang out with us for the show. We have businesses planned to talk to us. St. Augustine Church that does a lot of outreach in the community. We'll hear from residents. The mayor's on the show tomorrow live. He's going to be down there at Little Sister. Why are we there? Well, Osborne Village has been going through some challenges, but it's also going through some growth and change. So what's the future of the village and what's needed to sort of help people through some of the recent challenges, whether it's with violence or with business vacancies and such, and what's happening with the mix of population in that very important neighborhood to Winnipeg that's right in our city centre. So join us live tomorrow on location. Well, speaking of having conversations with community, Janet Stewart has popped in at 8:28 to tell us about the call-in conversation on Radio Noon today. Hi.
Hi, Marcy. This is actually a conversation you started last week, and we wanted to pick it up because it seemed to light a fire in people's bellies. People feel strongly about Canada Post and about the mail service they receive and the mail service their neighbours and friends receive, because it's not the same. It's not consistent across this province. Canada Post is apparently $750 million in the hole, maybe more so. That was last year's books. They looked at it and they were short $750 million, went over budget. So what is going to ensure a future for Canada Post? Because none of us want to see our taxes go up to support this Crown Corporation. How do we keep it going? What are you willing to give up in mail service? What are you willing to accept in terms of change? That's the question we're asking Manitobans today. And a lot of people already weighed in. Listener line is a great place you can do that because you can do it right now or anytime. 204-788-3797.
All right. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
And if you're thinking, didn't you guys talk about this earlier in the week? We did. But of course, that call-in conversation was put on hold because of the developing fire situation in northern Manitoba. So it is happening today. Between 12:30 and 1, you can leave a message now at Janet, as Janet just said, at 788-3797. Well, power is restored across Fort Richmond. You likely know this by now because your lights are on, and that means the traffic has been improving as well. But even though we're late in the drive, if you need us, 788-3093. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 10 degrees. Expect showers to begin today, a further 5 to 10 millimeters. They're sticking around and still cool for this time of year. The normal high is 20. Today, a modest 12 is our high. Hundreds of people forced out of Cranberry Portage by a massive wildfire may soon get some good news. They could get the all clear to return by the weekend. Earl Simmons, director of Manitoba Wildfire Services, says crews from Manitoba and Ontario have been working to protect the town. 40 more firefighters from Quebec and New Brunswick arrived today, and there is a possibility of showers today and tomorrow.
Sprinklers on top of buildings, and if we can get those running 2 hours before a fire gets into an area, it gives us a chance to protect those structures. But I'm feeling good about the work the fire crews are doing, and in fact, hopefully by the weekend we can perhaps get the folks back into Cranberry Portage.
Simmons says hydro and phone service has also been restored to Cranberry Portage. He says the fire is still more than 31,000 hectares in size, but it is not growing. Now, Premier Wab Kinew had a tour of the fire zone by air yesterday. He also met with evacuees in the PAW. Some worry they're having to pay their own hotel rooms and food. Kinew says his government will help those who have been displaced.
We are moderating our response to ensure that people are going to get the support that they need. In a response like this, the challenge is always about trying to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks.
Kinew says he has heard from those needing extra assistance, like seniors and those on fixed incomes. He says officials have started coordinating additional layers of response. Kinew also visited Flin Flon yesterday, met with firefighters, and saw the wildfire, as I mentioned, from a helicopter. Joanne Head is one of the evacuees who spoke with the Premier yesterday. She says the evacuation from Cranberry Portage was disorganized and especially stressful for herself and others with health conditions. Head thinks they should have been more prepared since dry conditions have put Cranberry Portage at risk of wildfires.
We're always at risk when the snow is gone and everything's dry. And we haven't had a lot of snow or anything, so we're going through a drought state again, and it's going to happen all over.
Head worries the area could face more wildfires in the future. In other news, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the owners of Food Fair want to talk to media later this morning after a police incident last night. In a release, the AMC says it wants to address a recent incident of violence at the grocery store on Portage Avenue. It says a number of staff members were taken to hospital. Police cars were outside the store last evening. Earlier this month, the AMC cut ties with that independent grocery chain after a store supervisor allegedly punched a woman accused of shoplifting. In the most recent release, AMC says it is working closely with the owners of Food Fair who have apologized for that incident. Food Fair owners have agreed to cultural sensitivity training for staff. Some summer camps in Manitoba are scrambling after expected provincial funding fizzled. Every year, the province distributes grants through its Green Team program. Well, this year, some camps received less money and some not at all. One of those denied funding was Camp Masad in Sandy Hook. Executive Director Daniel Sprintz says they're already facing financial pressures left over by the pandemic.
We were closed for 2 years straight. And for them to do this right now to us is sort of like a thumb in the face, like they don't know what we do. We're really hoping that the Manitoba government is going to reconsider.
Sprint says this is the first time Camp Masad has been denied funding. Ian Bushy, Minister for the Green Team program, says they received a record number of applications this year, but there just isn't enough money to go around. Well, how much do you owe this year in property taxes? Winnipeggers find out this week. The notice is in the mail if it hasn't already arrived. One item not coming to your mailbox this year is the education property tax rebate check. Rather than giving property owners a check in the mail like the former PC government, the NDP government is offering a break at the source. The 50% rebate has already been deducted off your tax bill. But next year, it all changes. The existing rebate and tax credit will be replaced with a new tax credit of up to $1,500. Want to know if you'll be paying more or less under the new system? All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, to see video explaining what the tax changes mean for you. You can also find the latest on the fire situation in northwest Manitoba and other news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Is there a button we can press too on the tax story where like someone will just pay for us and we don't have to pay? Or... No?
Why hasn't someone thought of that?
The website blew up. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news department this morning, along with Joni Nicolo, Megan Ketchison. And thanks to our live crew, Brad Lillies, Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi, as well as our hardworking team of associate producers I like to mention at the end of every program. I say their names each and every Friday. And our leaders in unit, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. Corey.
Highway 10 from Baker's Narrows to the intersection with Highway 39 still closed because of that fire near Cranberry Portage. That's the only real major issue out there right now.
All right. Where are we going to leave people with the weather here, Abby?
11 degrees downtown Winnipeg. We've had showers throughout the night. Would get more this morning, about 5 to 10 millimeters more. Across the province, we're expecting more conditions of mix of sun and clouds in the northern part of the province. And the south would see some rain, and we'll see highs ranging all the way to 19.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, if you care about Osborne Village, we sure hope that you take some time to be with us tomorrow morning when we're live from Little Sister Coffee Maker in that neighborhood. We're at 470 River Avenue live with the show. You can always weigh in, though, on our morning show listener line. What do you think the future of the village should be? What are the biggest challenges, and what are the things you love most about living in the village that have kept you there, either visiting there or if you live there, or if you do business there? 788-3205, 788-3205. So we'll be live on location tomorrow. Take care, be well, Manitoba, and we'll talk to you again. Coming up next, it's The Current.